Chapter 231. Ever since that night when he was ravaged 8 times, this woman had never appeared in Li Mu's dreams again. This made him think that what had happened back then was merely a coincidence. Until now, this familiar figure had appeared in his dream once again. This made Li Mu realize that the possibility of that incident being a coincidence was infinitely close to zero. Li Mu did not leave the dream immediately. He needed to figure out what was going on. Li Mu looked at the woman from afar and asked, "Who are you?" The woman said indifferently, "You don't need to know who I am." Li Mu asked tentatively, "Are you my inner demon?" With Li Mu's knowledge, other than an inner demon, he could not think of any other possibility. Even Dongxian could not casually invade other people's dreams. This was something that even Venerable Qianhuan could not do. "Inner demon?" The woman looked at him and said slowly, "You can understand it that way." Li Mu said warily, "What do you want?" The woman said, "I was born because of you. Why don't you ask yourself what you want?" Her words made Li Mu no longer doubt her identity. Except for the consciousness born in his body, no one could easily enter his dreams. Many people interpreted the high-level inner demon as a second soul. According to Li Mu's understanding, it was more like a second personality. In the same body, several different consciousnesses were born. Their age, personality, and even gender could be different. Li Mu had seen this kind of setting countless times in suspense movies. Li Mu asked warily, "You want to devour my consciousness?" The woman shook her head and said, "Not interested." Li Mu said in surprise, "Then what do you want?" The woman looked at Li Mu and said, "You killed Zhou Chu." Li Mu looked at the woman. The consciousness of the inner demon and the main body did not affect each other, so she did not know what she was thinking or what she knew. However, the experiences of this body could not be hidden from her. Although the person in front of him was a woman, Li Mu knew very well that he was her and she was him. He had nothing to hide from himself. Li Mu asked, "Don't people who are worse than beasts deserve to die?" The woman said, "Director Zhou is from the Zhou family, and His Majesty's surname is also Zhou. Aren't you afraid that His Majesty will be biased?" Li Mu looked at her and said, "You know a lot." The woman replied, "You are me, and I am you. I know what you're thinking." Li Mu looked at her and asked, "Then tell me, what am I thinking now?" Li Mu thought, if the inner demon only appeared in dreams, if he had a wet dream, what would it look like in the eyes of the inner demon? Whoosh! As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, the shadow of a whip came at him. Li Mu quickly dodged, and finally no longer doubted it. She even knew what he was thinking in his dreams. Other than his inner demon, what else could she be? The woman actually did not know what Li Mu was thinking. She only saw that his expression was strange, wretched, and lustful. He could not be thinking of anything good, so she might as well whip him first. Li Mu looked at the woman and said, "Don't be impulsive. Hitting me is hitting you." The shadow of the whip slowly disappeared. The woman asked again, "Why are you doing this? What good is it for you?" Li Mu said, "You are me. You don't know why I'm doing this?" The woman did not speak. Li Mu guessed that she could only understand his thoughts in his dreams. He could not help but feel relieved. Worried that she would be angry and hang him up to beat him again, Li Mu said, "Because I am a bailiff. It is my duty to get rid of evil and bring justice to the people. Moreover, His Majesty has treated me with sincerity. I have to clean up the evil in Luoyang and unite the people to repay His Majesty." The woman looked at him indifferently and said, "Help her unite the people? It is unprecedented for a woman to be the emperor. It subverts ethics and disturbs the morals. How can a man become her pawn?" "Watch your words." Li Mu glared at her and said, "During His Majesty's reign, he implemented benevolence and reformed the legal system. Many people have a better life. In contrast, during the time of the previous emperor, the 36 counties were filled with corrupt officials. Even Luoyang was a mess. If I don't help such a wise emperor, should I help a tyrant?" Li Mu was dissatisfied with the woman in front of him. As his other personality, she did not have the consciousness of the main personality. Li Mu felt ashamed for having such a personality. The woman was silent for a moment. She looked at Li Mu one last time and her figure slowly faded away. Li Mu pointed at her and said, "Don't go. I haven't finished talking." The woman's figure completely disappeared. Li Mu also woke up from his dream. He touched his head with a puzzled expression. This time he did not get beaten up. This time she was not as unreasonable as last time. He had read about the inner demons in books. They were all violent and murderous monsters. This was the first time Li Mu had heard of such a type. It was a dreamless night. Li Mu hugged Little White and slept until dawn. After sending her to the yamen, he waited outside the palace with Zhang Chun. The morning court had already begun. They did not know what was going on inside. Until now, they had not been summoned. The two of them waited outside the palace in boredom. In the crepe myrtle palace, some of the courtiers were arguing in full swing. An official said angrily, "A country has its laws and a family has its rules. Zhou Chu has already been tried. Who gave him the right to execute on his own?" An imperial censor objected. Zhou Chu was unrepentant and deranged. He angered the heavens and attracted the thunder fire. What does it have to do with others? The official said, "Who attracted the heavenly thunder of purple cloud?" The imperial censor said, "Do you have evidence?" Some officials have already calculated that Zhou Chu's death is related to Li Mu. His death is also related to the heavens. Why don't you interrogate the heavens? You are twisting words and forcing logic. You are trying to accuse him. Whether it is true or not, we will know if we use the soul search on Li Mu. The court was divided into two factions regarding Zhou Chu's case. One faction believed that Li Mu, as an arrestor, did not have the right to execute anyone. His actions were considered intentional murder. The other faction believed that Zhou Chu died from the wrath of the heavens. The heavens were greater than everything. Even if the wrath of the heavens was caused by Li Mu, it should not be blamed on him. The two factions argued endlessly. The entire court was very noisy. Silence. The young female official's voice reached everyone's ears. Everyone shut their mouths. The court was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. No matter how they argued, the final verdict of this case still depended on the emperor. The moment the court quieted down, an image suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The scene was the scene in front of the Shindu Yamen. Zhou Chu, who was already dead, was in the picture. The officials were shocked. At this moment, they remembered that His Majesty was not only the emperor, but also an expert of the upper realm. He had already reached the peak of the profound light technique and was able to reenact the past. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the image. In the image, Zhou Chu's expression was arrogant. He said to Li Mu, "That's right, after I leave, you have to pay more attention to that old man's family. I heard that they live outside the city. You have to be careful when you walk on the road. There are many people riding horses outside. If one or two are killed, it will not be good." One of the imperial censors could not help but point at the image of Zhou Chu and said angrily, "Lawless, lawless, does he not have the law in his eyes?" Another imperial censor spat and said coldly, "This is simply the behavior of a beast. He deserves to die." In the court, many people's faces were filled with anger. This was a blatant provocation of the law and justice. They only heard that Zhou Chu was arrogant, but they did not expect him to be so arrogant. Under the strong impact of this image, several officials of the new party also retracted their heads. Whoever dares to speak up for Zhou Chu will definitely offend the public. What worried them more was the emperor's thoughts. His Majesty used his great magical power to reenact the image of yesterday. Does this mean that he is not on the side of the Zhou family? In the video, facing the threats around him, the young constable said, "God is watching what we do. God is watching us." Zhou Chu sneered, "God? After so many years, I really want to see what God looks like. If you have the ability, let them come down." The young arrestor was obviously enraged. He pointed to the sky and scolded God for being blind. As his voice fell, several lightning bolts suddenly fell from the sky. Under the last purple lightning bolt, Zhou Chu turned into ashes. Even some of the high-ranking officials in the court felt their blood boil when they saw this scene. A few of the imperial censors were so excited that their beards trembled. Their eyes were filled with envy and reverence. This was the response of the heavenly axiom. It was the greatest recognition that the heavenly axiom gave to a person. There was no imperial censor who did not desire such recognition. A body of righteousness that can shake the heavens. How magnificent is this? He is still Li Mu, the Li Mu who wrote Do Yi's Injustice. It is His Majesty's blessing to have such a person in the fairies' capital. It is the blessing of the great Zhou. His Majesty must not wrong such a talent. The Empress's dignified voice came from behind the curtain. How do you think this case should be resolved? At the forefront of the officials, a figure stood out. Seeing the figure, all the officials held their breaths. The first person to stand out was none other than the head of the Zhou family, Zhou Chu's uncle, and also the Empress's biological father. The middle-aged man looked up at the image and said, "The people's hearts are the foundation of the great Zhou's continuation. Zhou Chu killed innocent people and did not repent. In the end, he angered the heavenly axiom and punished the heavenly axiom. The officials in the court should learn from this and restrain themselves and their descendants. They should not bully the people and bully the villagers." The head of the Zhou family's words undoubtedly determined the nature of the case. Even the officials of the new party would not use this opportunity to attack the arrestor. Zhou Ting clenched his fists and knelt on the ground with his head lowered. He closed his eyes and said in a trembling voice, "I have not taught my son well. I have let your Majesty and the people down. I am ashamed to be in the court. I wish to resign from the position of Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works. I hope your Majesty will approve." Chapter 232. Li Mu and Zhang Chun waited for a long time at the gate of the palace. Instead of the Empress, they saw Mr. Mei. Mr. Mei walked out of the palace gate and said to the two, "It's all right now. You can go back." Zhang Chun was stunned and asked, "What's going on inside?" Mr. Mei looked at Li Mu and said, "Her Majesty used the dark light technique to recreate the scene of yesterday." All the officials were furious. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Works, Zhou Ting, resigned because he didn't teach his son well. Her Majesty has agreed that Zhou Ting died because of the wrath of heaven. It has nothing to do with you. You can go back now. Zhang Chun asked, "Is there anything else?" Mr. Mei asked, "What do you want?" Zhang Chun shook his head and felt a little regretful, but he didn't say anything. Mr. Mei suddenly took out a stack of fulu from his sleeve and handed it to Li Mu, saying, "This is for you from Her Majesty." Li Mu looked at the stack of purple cloud thunder talismans in his hand thoughtfully. Mr. Mei handed him a jade pendant and said, "This is also for you from Her Majesty." Li Mu took the jade pendant and looked at it over and over. He didn't see anything special about it. So he asked, "What is this?" Mr. Mei said, "This jade pendant can hide the secrets of heaven. Keep it with you." Hearing this, Li Mu suddenly felt that the jade pendant in his hand became heavier. Hiding the secrets of heaven didn't seem to have any real effect. Could neither increase defense nor enhance attack. However, it had a very important function, which was to prevent the ultimate masters from calculating. The masters of Dongxian had already seen through the mysteries of heaven. They could observe the stars and know fate. With a pinch of their fingers, they could predict good or bad luck. They could even calculate someone's location and monitor them remotely through the dark light technique. If one had something to hide the secrets of heaven, they could block the calculations of the masters of Dongxian and above. This could be very useful sometimes. The jade pendant that concealed the heavenly secrets and the stack of purple cloud thunder talismans made Li Mu wonder if the Empress knew anything about it. Logically speaking, even if a seventh realm expert could calculate that Zhou Chu's death was related to him, they shouldn't be able to confirm whether he had died directly or indirectly at Li Mu's hands. The Thousand Illusions had said before that the mysteries of heaven were hard to predict. No one could calculate all of the mysteries of heaven. The so-called arithmetic was nothing more than some hazy feelings, very difficult to be specific. He accepted the jade pendant and bowed to Mr. Mei, saying, "Sister Mei, please thank His Majesty for me." Mr. Mei sighed and said, His Majesty has suffered a lot to protect you this time. I hope you will remember his kindness. Li Mu used to have some worries, but after today his worries had disappeared. From today onwards, he truly regarded himself as one of the Empress' men. It was a pity that he hadn't been summoned today, so he didn't have the chance to see her. However, there was no need to be anxious. Now, he had already begun to hug the Empress's thigh. There would be plenty of opportunities to see her in the future. Zhou Manor. Crash. In a small courtyard, the sound of porcelain shattering could be heard. The maids and servants all stood in the courtyard with their heads lowered, not daring to speak. The middle-aged woman picked up a vase and smashed it. She panted heavily and gritted her teeth, saying, "Zhou Chu died in vain. I can't accept this. I can't accept this." She pointed in the direction of the palace and cursed. She's also a member of the Zhou family. How can she be so cruel? Slap. Zhou Ting slapped her face and said in a low voice, "Shut up. His Majesty isn't someone you can talk about." The woman stood there in a daze after being slapped. Moments later, she raised her head and looked at Zhou Ting. She shook her head and said, "Crazy. Everyone in the Zhou family is crazy. I want to leave this place. If you don't avenge me, I will." Zhou Ting looked at her departing figure. He raised his foot and finally put it down. In one day he looked haggard and old. The scene in the court today kept replaying in his mind. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, saying, "Li Mu." The palace. The Empress had been in the back garden for a long time after the court ended. She looked in the direction of the Zhou family. After a long time, she retracted her gaze and asked, "Am I really cruel?" The young official said, "Zhou Chu deserved his death. Can't be blamed on anyone. Your Majesty doesn't need to blame yourself for this." The Empress seemed to be asking her, but it also seemed like she wasn't asking her. She didn't say anything else and left the garden. She walked in front of a magnificent palace. Above the palace, the words "Ancestral Temple" were written. The young official stopped in front of the ancestral temple. Only the imperial family could enter the Great Zhou's ancestral temple. For them, it was a forbidden area. The Empress walked into the ancestral temple. What greeted her eyes was a high platform. On the high platform, from top to bottom, there were more than 10 memorial tablets of the Great Zhou's emperors. In front of the memorial tablets, sandalwood incense rose in spirals. In addition to these memorial tablets, the most eye-catching thing in the ancestral temple was a small cauldron. These small cauldrons had 3 legs and 2 handles. They were neatly arranged in a row under the memorial tablets of the Great Zhou's emperors. After a careful count, one would find that there were a total of 36 small cauldrons. The 36 small cauldrons emitted a faint golden light. The golden light was strong and weak. The strong light was dazzling, and the weak light was dim. The golden light of each small cauldron condensed into golden lines that converged in a giant cauldron in the ancestral temple. The giant cauldron had 3 legs and 6 handles. The body of the cauldron didn't emit any light, but there was a golden dragon swimming in the cauldron. The golden dragon felt the Empress walk in and swam out of the cauldron. It happily circled above her head a few times, and then flew back into the cauldron. In the corner of the ancestral temple there were 3 prayer mats. 3 figures sat cross-legged on the prayer mats. Their auras were extremely obscure. They all wore black dragon robes. If one looked closely, one would find that the golden dragon embroidered on their robes only had 4 claws. An old man with a face as withered as tree bark on the left opened his eyes. He looked at the most dazzling cauldron in the center of the 36 small cauldrons and said, "The psyche power of the people of the divine capital has multiplied several times in this month. The guy you transferred from the North County is quite capable." The Empress's expression was calm. She looked at the golden dragon swimming in the cauldron and asked, "When will this strand of Emperor's chi be complete?" The old man said, "During Emperor Wen's time, the sea was clear and the rivers were clear. The people were loyal, but it took 20 years. 2 generations of emperors spent nearly 100 years to produce 1 strand, and it has already been used by you. With the current Great Zhou, It will take at least 30 years for the next strand of Emperor's qi to be complete. The Empress frowned and said, "That's too long." The old man said with a smile, "The Zhou clan has been planning to steal the throne since a few hundred years ago. We've been planning this for so long, and our ancestors have sacrificed their lives to obtain a stream of monarch qi, yet you're not interested in being the emperor." "How ironic," the Empress said coldly. "The Zhou family's matters have nothing to do with me." The old man smiled and said, "I'm afraid you will have to sit in this position for a long time. You will slowly lose your family and friends. The officials will respect you and fear you, but they will never reveal their true feelings to you. Your parents will call you Your Majesty and have ulterior motives. No girl will get close to you and no man will like you. You will slowly lose love, hate, happiness, anger, sadness. Stop talking. It's useless. This is the fate of every emperor. You will not be an exception." A golden whip appeared in the Empress's hand. She said word by word, "I told you to stop talking." The old man lowered his head and immediately fell into a deep sleep. The Empress walked out of the ancestral temple. The young female official said respectfully, "Your Majesty." The Empress looked at the respectful expression on her face and said, "Return to the palace." Fairy's capital, Li residence. Li Mu had just upgraded the formation in his residence. He used some Fulu and Dharma treasures that he didn't need in a shop in Fairy's capital that was specially opened for cultivators to exchange for spiritual jades. Then, he used the spiritual jades to buy a set of formation flags from another shop. Although Fairy's capital was mostly populated by commoners, there were a few markets that were specially opened for cultivators to trade. Using the upgraded formation of the formation chess, it could temporarily trap a fifth realm cultivator. If one wanted to sneak into the formation silently, they would have to have the cultivation of Dongxian. After doing all this, Li Mu gave most of the purple cloud thunder talismans that the Empress gave him to Xiaobai to protect herself. He only kept a few for himself: the jade pendant and the thunder talisman that the Empress gave him. One was to steal the sky, while the other was to conceal heaven's secrets. No matter how slow Li Mu was, he understood the Empress's intention at this moment. The purple cloud thunder talisman was the proof that Li Mu would use his thunder technique in the future. Otherwise, after Zhou Chu's incident, he couldn't reveal his thunder technique in front of others. This jade pendant that concealed heaven's secrets would prevent cultivators above Dongxian from finding out that he was the culprit. The Empress had thoughtfully prepared these for Li Mu. The Empress must already know that Zhou Chu's death was his doing. A transcendent powerhouse was terrifying. Even so, she still chose to protect Li Mu. This meant that Li Mu still had a place in her heart. He didn't work so hard for her in vain. Not only was she righteous, but she was also so protective. He really loved the Empress like this. Chapter 233. Half a month had passed since the Zhou Chu incident. In the morning, Li Mu, who was sitting cross-legged on his bed, slowly opened his eyes. A golden light flashed in his eyes. Although he had been preparing to cultivate both Buddhism and Taoism, he had spent more than 90% of his time cultivating under the guidance of Taoism. He had very little time to recite scriptures and practice Buddhism. Especially after entering the spirit-concentrating realm, the growth of his mana had slowed down. He had spent all his time cultivating Taoism. Now, his Taoist cultivation had reached the third realm, but his Buddhist cultivation had only barely broken through the first realm last night. The first realm of Buddhism was called breakthrough. It meant that Buddhist disciples could see through the mortal world and enter into Buddhism. This realm required the cultivation of the six senses. Now, Li Mu's six senses had been perfected. He did not need to use any supernatural powers to hear the conversation between the butcher and the waiter in the tea house a few streets away. Through his sense of smell, he could easily distinguish the various smells in the air and trace them back to their source. In a way, he already had the innate supernatural powers of some monsters. Some monsters were born with a keen sense of hearing and smell. Although humans were suitable for cultivation, they were far inferior to monsters in terms of innate supernatural powers. Li Qing had once advised him that only by cultivating one of the two sects of Buddhism and Taoism could one attain a profound level. At that time, Li Mu did not feel anything. Now, he finally realized that a person's energy was limited. Even if he was talented in both Buddhism and Taoism, it was impossible to cultivate both to a high level. The realms after Buddhism required even more time. His next cultivation focus was on how to break through to the transcendent realm as soon as possible. After the Zhou Chu incident, Zhang Chun was unexpectedly promoted again. He was promoted from Divine Capital Deputy to Divine Capital Magistrate. He was now the leader of the Divine Capital Yamen. Not only that, His Majesty did not appoint a Divine Capital Deputy or Divine Capital Magistrate. In other words, he was in charge of this huge yamen alone. No one could order him around anymore. Li Mu was still the constable of the Divine Capital Yamen. He was an official, not an official. Although officials and officials were both civil servants of the Great Zhou and were paid by the state, there was a clear distinction between the two. There were no harsh requirements to become an official of Great Zhou. Officials were generally appointed by local officials, or their sons would inherit their father's business. As long as their family background was clean and they had not committed any crimes within 3 generations, they would have the qualifications to become a glorious official of the Great Zhou. But officials were different. The lowest-ranking official in Great Zhou, even if it was just a small county magistrate, still needed to receive a few years of formal education in the academy. Only after a few years would they have the qualifications to enter the imperial court as an official. This was a rule set by Emperor Wen in order to clean up the chaos in Great Zhou's officialdom and improve the quality of the officials as a whole. At that time, this measure indeed played a very big role. At that time, the imperial court was full of nepotism, and the officials formed cliques to pursue personal interests. The morality and ability of the officials were mixed. The appearance of the academy greatly improved the situation. If one wanted to become an official in the imperial court, one had to learn the thoughts of the sages in the academies, cultivate one's morals, and learn how to govern a country and cultivate. For a long time, the academies had sent countless talents to the imperial court. This rule had been passed down since the time of Emperor Wen and had been used to this day. Even if the emperor wanted to promote someone, he had to let that person undergo tempering in the academies. Emperor Wen's rule had a far-reaching impact. In the hearts of the people and officials of Great Zhou, Emperor Wen had a very high status. The successive emperors of Great Zhou did not dare to break the rules set by him. In Li Mu's view, this Emperor Wen was really far-sighted. Although this method was different from the imperial examination, it was also very advanced compared to the previous system of selecting officials. Of course, even if Emperor Wen was called a sage, there were still things that he did not expect. For example, the nature of the academy had changed greatly from when it was first established. The deans of the 4 academies were all transcendents. In the academy, there were countless experts in the middle realm. Although they were far from the 4 sects and 6 schools, they were still an incomparably powerful force. The officials of Great Zhou could only be born from the academy. The status of the academy gradually became higher and higher, and even had a tendency to surpass the imperial court. Whether it was the Shao royal family that wanted to regain their glory or the Zhou family that wanted to replace them, to facilitate this major event, they could not do without the support of the academy. Li Mu had never thought of becoming an official, so he did not need to go to the academy to further his studies. Based on what he had seen in Chengdu, becoming an official might not be a good thing. Under the protection of the Empress, being a minor official was much more comfortable than being an official. There was no need for Li Mu to worry about national affairs. All he needed to do was to bring Shao Bai around the streets of the divine capital every day to ensure that there were no crimes or disturbances in his jurisdiction. That was enough for him to fulfill his duty. After Zhou Chu's incident, his status in the hearts of the people had risen to the peak. This allowed him to obtain willpower from the people of Chengdu without deliberately doing anything. With this speed, it was not impossible for him to advance to the Abhijna level within a year. After Zhou Chu's incident, the Zhou family's reputation in Chengdu was not greatly affected. Although Zhou Chu had committed a heinous crime, The Zhou family's handling of this matter did not make the people feel disgusted. There were many disciples of the Zhou family, and Zhou Chu was only one of them. Other than Zhou Chu, the other disciples of the Zhou family did not have any misdeeds. In comparison, the Shao royal family's performance in Xindu was even worse. In the past few hundred years, they had been the masters of the great Zhou dynasty and Xindu. Although they had been suppressed by the Zhou family for a short period of time, the sense of superiority in their bones could not be erased. Li Mu counted with his fingers. He had not been in Xindu for long, but he had offended the 3 provinces, 6 ministries, 9 temples, the Shao family, the Zhou family, and the academy. Other than the academy, he had offended almost everyone he could. Li Mu had already offended the Shao family and its old clique before he came to Xindu. When he pushed for the abolition of the substitute crime silver, he had also beaten up the children of many officials in the Ministry of Rights, Ministry of Justice, Taichung Temple, and the 3 provinces and 6 ministries. With Zhou Chu's incident, he had also offended the Zhou family. He was only missing the academy to become the public enemy of Xindu. Among the common people, the situation was the exact opposite. Li Mu was now very popular among the common people. He could go to the small restaurants on the street, to the brothels and taverns. As long as he wanted to, he could buy food, use, and entertainment for free. When he passed by the brothel keeper ran out countless times, bringing along many girls. They all winked at Li Mu and said coquettishly, "Constable Li, come in." Xiao Bai was so scared that she did not care about the candied haws in her mouth. She ran over and hugged Li Mu's arm, holding her head high and chest out in front of them. Ever since Lu Hanyan went to Mount Baiyun to cultivate, she had been strictly carrying out the task given to her by Lu Hanyan. She did not allow any other seductress to appear beside Li Mu. These girls from the brothels were naturally her main targets of protection. The brothel keeper glanced at Xiao Bai and said to Li Mu, "Constable Li, why are you so shy? The girls are not charging you." Li Mu waved his hand. Next time. The Yamen had its own rules. In order to prevent officials from being corrupt, they could not eat or take the common people's food for free. They could not go to the brothels during the day. Of course, going to the brothels during the day was also forbidden. There were countless eyes in Luoyang staring at Li Mu. He had to be careful with his words and actions. He could not give anyone a chance to take advantage of him. Xiao Bai was still hugging Li Mu's arm tightly. She said, "Sister Lu said that when you come to Luoyang you can't fool around. You can't go to that kind of place." He was the one who saved the little fox, but she had become Lu Hanyan's spy. Li Mu looked at her and asked, "If I go to that kind of place, will you tell Sister Lu?" Xiao Bai nodded without hesitation. She said, "I promise Sister Lu." Li Mu asked again, "If I don't let you tell her, will you listen to Sister Lu or me?" This question made Xiao Bai stop chewing on the candied hawthorn. She muttered, I. After a while, she lowered her head and said softly, I will listen to you, benefactor." Li Mu was comforted. Xiao Bai's answer proved that she was still his caring little girl. Even if she made a mistake, she would help him hide it. Who would not like a little girl like her? Of course, Li Mu would not make such a mistake. He just wanted to tease Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai lowered her head and hesitated for a while. Then she looked up and said, "Benefactor, if you want, Xiao Bai can do it too. I have already turned into a human." Li Mu patted her head and said, "I'm joking. I won't go to that kind of place." He knew very well that before Xiao Bai transformed, she was prepared to give herself to him at any time. However, she was placed by Lu Hanyan to keep an eye on Li Mu. If she betrayed Lu Hanyan and stole from him, how could the two of them be good sisters in the future? Although Xiao Bai was indeed very attractive, Li Mu would not lose the big picture for a small gain. He would not be greedy for a moment of pleasure and bury the fuse for a future Azura battlefield. After receiving Li Mu's promise, the girl became happy again. She happily held onto Li Mu's arm and turned back to stick out her tongue in the direction of the brothel. Along the way, Li Mu bought some snacks for Xiao Bai. He was about to return to the yamen when his gaze inadvertently swept across the front. His gaze suddenly froze. Two figures walked past on the street in front of him. The two of them, one old and one young, did not see Li Mu. Li Mu did not recognize the young man. His gaze swept past him and stopped on the old man. This was the first time Li Mu saw this old man, but his figure overlapped with a figure in Li Mu's memory. To be precise, it was the memory of the assassin that Li Mu had obtained from Madame Chu in the North County. This old man was the one who had hired the assassin to assassinate Li Mu in the North County. He followed behind the young man step by step. It was obvious that the young man was the leader. In this way, the mastermind behind the assassination in the North County was about to be revealed. In the Shindu Yamen, Li Mu reached out and swiped the void. The image of a young man appeared in the air. Wang Wu looked at the image and said in shock, "No way, boss. You just killed Zhou Chuchu and now you've provoked Zhou Qin?" Chapter 234. Mr. Mei had warned Li Mu to be careful of the Zhou family. Li Mu thought that the assassination in the North County should have been done by the Zhou family. It was not until today that he met the old man in the memory of the assassin that he finally locked onto the mastermind behind the scenes. Through Wang Wu, Li Mu confirmed the man's identity once again. Zhou Chun was Zhou Chu's elder brother, but he was not Zhou Ting's son. Among the four brothers of the Zhou family, Zhou Ting was the fourth. Zhou Chun was the only son of the third brother. Zhou Chun usually kept a low profile and was not as flamboyant as Zhou Chu. He also did not bully the people, so the people of Luoyang did not know much about him. The old man beside him was his bodyguard. The disciples of the big families in Luoyang all had bodyguards, and these bodyguards were the closest to them. The fact that the old man appeared in the killer's memory meant that the assassination in Beijing was most likely Zhou Chen's plan. At that time, Li Mu had just offended the old party. If something happened to him, the old party would be the first to be suspected. However, Li Mu did not know whether Zhou Chen had acted on his own, or whether the real mastermind of the Zhou family was involved. The killer was dead, and Li Mu could not accuse Zhou Chen with just his words alone. Moreover, because of him, the Zhou family had just lost a young disciple. If Li Mu pointed the finger at Zhou Chen now, it might completely enrage the Zhou family and bring about their intense revenge. However, the revenge for the assassination had to be taken. As long as he knew the mastermind behind it, he could take his time to plan what to do next. Li Mu walked to the front of the yamen and saw Zhang Chun walking in listlessly. Li Mu greeted him. "Sir, you're out of court?" Ever since he was promoted to Luoyang magistrate, Zhang Chun's rank had risen from 6th grade to 5th grade, and he was qualified to attend court. Although there were many 5th-rank officials in Luoyang and not everyone had the opportunity to attend court, the Luoyang Yamen was different from the 6 Yamens. Above them, there were assistant ministers, doctors, and minister counselors. If they had nothing to do, they could stay in the Yamen. Zhang Chun was the only official in charge of the Yamen. Unlike Li Mu, who could sleep as long as he wanted with Xiao Bai in his arms, Zhang Chun had to wake up early every 3 days to prepare for the morning court. Li Mu replied, "Your Excellency left court today, so you're a bit late." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "Don't mention it. The quarrel in the court today was too intense." The guy behind this official almost sprayed his saliva all over this official's face. Li Mu asked curiously, "What's the matter?" Zhang Chun said, "It's all because of the academy. His Majesty thinks that almost all the officials in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou, including Luoyang, are from the academy. In the long run, it will be detrimental to the country. He wants to give up some of the positions of the officials and directly select them from the people. However, the officials are against it." Li Mu said, "That's good." Zhang Chun glanced at him and said, "What's good about it?" Before the academy, the morals and abilities of the officials in the imperial court were uneven. Many untalented and incompetent people could also hold important positions in the imperial court. The people suffered unspeakably. After the academy, the quality of the officials has greatly improved. If the selection of officials goes back to the old days, won't the people suffer that kind of pain again? It seemed that Zhang Chun also supported the academy. Li Mu asked, "Your Excellency, are you also from the academy?" Hearing this, Zhang Chun's face showed a proud expression. He said, "Yes, when I was young, I studied in the Myriad Scroll Academy. After I finished my studies in the academy, I became the county magistrate of Yangqiu." Li Mu asked. Before the academy, the people suffered unspeakably. After the academy, the people's lives became better? Zhang Chun's lips moved, but he found that he could not answer Li Mu. Before Emperor Wan, after the golden age of Emperor Wu, the counties were no longer troubled by the demons and ghosts. However, the people's lives did not seem to be better. After the death of Emperor Wan, the quality of the officials was greatly improved. Today, the people should be living a better life. However, as far as he knew, the people of the 36 counties of Great Zhou were far from living in peace and contentment. He looked at Li Mu and asked, "Do you mean that Emperor Wan was wrong?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Emperor Wan was not wrong. However, the decrees of Emperor Wen's time are not necessarily suitable for the present. During Emperor Wen's time, the officials in the imperial court were both good and bad. There was a big flaw in the way the imperial court chose officials. Emperor Wen's decisive reform led to the famous rule of Emperor Wan. At that time, the academy was beneficial to improving the ecology of the imperial court. But it's different now. The chaos of the imperial court during Emperor Wen's time has long disappeared. The students of the academy have almost monopolized the imperial court. The officials are divided into camps based on the academy. They form cliques and protect each other. The decrees of Emperor Wen's time are no longer suitable for the current imperial court." Zhang Chun looked at him with a strange expression and said, "I really should let you attend the imperial court. If you were there in the morning, there would not be no one to speak for Her Majesty." Li Mu was very sure that many people in the imperial court must have seen what he saw. However, they were all from the academy. If they agreed with the Empress, wouldn't they be standing on the opposite side of the academy? They already belonged to their own camp. Naturally, they would not betray their own camp. Moreover, with the power and influence of the academy, even the new party and the old party had to rely on it. Who in the imperial court dared to oppose the academy? Li Mu could imagine the scene of Her Majesty being opposed by the officials in the morning court. Unfortunately, he was only a minor official and was not even qualified to defend her. Li Mu did not know much about the academy. After calling Wang Wu, he had a better understanding of the academy. There were 4 great academies in the divine capital. They were called Baichuan, Qingyun, Wanwan, and Bailu. They started during the reign of Emperor Wan and had been passed down for more than 100 years. Among the 4 great academies, Bailu Academy was different from the other 3. It was the only academy that was directly under the Ministry of War. The dean of Bailu Academy was the Minister of War. The purpose of Bailu Academy's existence was to defend against foreign enemies. It had never been involved in political struggles. Almost all the students from Bailu Academy would not stay in the divine capital. They needed to go to the borders of the Great Zhou to protect the border counties and prevent the neighboring countries, the Demon Country, the Ghost Region, and the Dragon Clan from invading. Fortunately, after the martial emperor, the Great Zhou had become the most powerful country in the ancestral land. Most of the surrounding countries respected the Great Zhou. Those who did not respect the Great Zhou as their sovereign country did not dare to offend the Great Zhou. The Demon Country and the Ghost Region had always been in a state of internal strife. They did not pose much of a threat to the Great Zhou for the time being. Although the Dragon Clan was powerful, they lived in the sea for a long time and rarely appeared on the mainland. The current situation of the Great Zhou was more of an internal problem than an external one. Wanwan Academy focused on teaching the concept of governance and governance. Many of the students from Wanwan Academy did not know how to cultivate, but they all had unique views on how to govern a country. After graduating from the academy, those who were more capable would stay in the divine capital to take up positions. Those who were less capable would be sent to other places to train. Qingyun Academy and Baichuan Academy focused more on cultivation. Those who studied in these 2 academies were all students with a certain level of cultivation talent. After leaving the academy, they would either take up important positions in the divine capital or guard a county. They had the brightest future. There were 36 counties in the Great Zhou, and at least 90 of them came from these two academies. There were 106 county governors, county ministers, and county lieutenants. Of course, the academies did not belong to any political party. In terms of cohesion, they were naturally not as united as the new party or the old party. However, the status of the academies was extraordinary. The students who graduated from the academies all had a deep sense of belonging to the academies. Perhaps they were dissatisfied with the academies when they were studying, but they would never allow outsiders to trample on the dignity of the academies. Whether it was in the divine capital or in the various counties, officials who came from the same academy would naturally have a close relationship. Everything was shown in the imperial court, and they would form a cohesive group. The imperial palace. It was already late at night. The empress stood in the empty palace. She no longer looked dignified in front of others. There was still anger on her face. She was angry about what happened in the imperial court. She looked around, trying to find someone to talk to and vent her frustrations. However, she could not find anyone. In fact, since she was forced to take this position 3 years ago, there was no one she could talk to. That person was right. Sitting in this position, she would slowly lose her family and friends. No one would reveal their true feelings to her. Her parents called her Her Majesty and wanted her to pass the throne to a descendant of the Zhou family. Her former friends only had respect and fear for her now. She had gotten everything that others wanted, but she had lost everything that she wanted. She walked out of the palace and looked up at the sky. Suddenly, she thought of someone. The Li residence. Li Mu was sleeping soundly with Xiao Bai in his arms. Suddenly, white mist filled his vision. A familiar figure appeared in front of him. Li Mu had not seen his other personality for a long time. When he saw her again, he felt a sense of familiarity. He waved at her and said, "Long time no see." Although the interaction between the two personalities was not very pleasant in the beginning, she did not appear every day. She also did not torture Li Mu every time she appeared. Li Mu was not as afraid of her as he was in the beginning. The beautiful woman's expression was a little ugly. She did not pay attention to Li Mu. Li Mu's heart skipped a beat. He wondered if she was on her period. Would her inner demons be on their period? In order to prevent her from venting her anger on him, Li Mu prepared to slip away. The next moment, the scenery in front of him changed. The two of them appeared at the peak of a mountain. There was a pavilion at the peak of the mountain. At this moment, the two of them were sitting in the pavilion. There were a few exquisite dishes in front of them. The aroma of the dishes made Li Mu swallow a mouthful of saliva. He complained in his heart. Whose dream was this? Why was her control of the dream more skillful than his? The surrounding scenery was so real. Li Mu could hear the birds, smell the fragrance of flowers, and even feel the mountain breeze blowing on his face. The few dishes in front of him were so delicious that Li Mu began to wonder whether this was a dream or reality. Legend has it that the powerhouses of the upper realm can use a kind of dream transference ability. They can use their consciousness to invade other people's dreams and freely weave the content of the dream. The person who was transferred by the dream would not be able to distinguish between the dream and reality. They would even be trapped in it forever. Li Mu looked around and could not help but sigh. The legendary dream transference technique was just like this, right? Li Mu looked at the woman opposite him and asked, "Are you in a bad mood?" The woman did not answer, but the answer was written on her face. Li Mu did not know why a heart demon would be in a bad mood. He poured a cup of wine for the two of them and said, "Since you are in a bad mood, I will accompany you to drink a few cups." He gulped down the wine in his cup and sighed softly. The woman looked at him and asked, "What are you sighing for?" There was nothing to hide from his other self. Li Mu said leisurely, "Unfortunately, I am not Lord Zhang. Otherwise, in today's morning court, I would not have let His Majesty face the officials alone." The woman raised her eyebrows, looked at Li Mu and said, "What's so good about that woman? She is just a rebel who seized power and stole the country. Is it worth it for you to protect her like this?" Bang! Li Mu slammed the wine cup on the stone table, stood up abruptly and said impolitely, If you disrespect His Majesty again, I will go back. You can drink this wine alone." The mouth of the person who received it was soft. After receiving so many benefits from the Empress, Li Mu could not protect her in the court. If he could not even protect her in the dream, then the next time he received benefits from the Empress, his conscience would not be at ease. The woman did not expect that this sentence would anger Li Mu. Her gaze swept over him, and she lowered her head and said, "Well, I will not speak ill of her. Sit down." Chapter 235. Li Mu didn't know what other people's inner demons were like, but his seemed to be somewhat different. She obviously didn't have much desire to erode Li Mu's consciousness and occupy his body. Instead, she was not very friendly to the Empress. Was it because of jealousy? Speaking of which, Li Mu was also a little jealous of the Empress at first. After all, she was young and had a high position. She had stepped into the upper realm before the age of 30. Who wouldn't be envious of her? Could it be that the birth of this woman was due to Li Mu's jealousy? Cultivation was really dangerous at every step. Even a small emotion in the heart could be infinitely magnified. The inner demons had no substance. If he wanted to overcome or eliminate them, he had to rely on his inner cultivation. The beautiful woman took a sip of wine and asked, "You have never met her. Why are you so protective of her?" Li Mu said, "Your Majesty treats me sincerely, so I should treat Your Majesty sincerely. Moreover, although Your Majesty is a woman, compared to the previous emperors of the Great Zhou, her wisdom and virtue should be at the forefront. The North County girl died unjustly, and the court covered up a corrupt official. Your Majesty upheld justice for her. The Academy has become a chronic disease of the Great Zhou, and the students of the Academy have formed cliques for selfish interests and control the court. No one in the court dares to mention it. Only Your Majesty is aggressive and brave to reform. Isn't such a person worthy of respect and protection?" After Li Mu finished speaking, he raised his head and drank a glass of wine, secretly feeling pity in his heart. If these words were heard by the Empress, she might be happy and reward him with some treasures. Unfortunately, he didn't even have the chance to see the Empress and could only talk to himself in his dreams. The woman took a deep look at Li Mu and didn't say anything in the end. She drank alone. Although Li Mu was curious, he didn't ask much. A personality with self-consciousness, to some extent, was a completely different person. They had their own fantasy life and identity. Li Mu had seen a movie before, in which the protagonist had 10 personalities with different identities. Their gender, age, and identity were different, and between the different personalities they would kill each other. Judging from the current situation, Li Mu and his other self were getting along quite well. Even if she wanted to harm Li Mu could still exit the dream at any time. She didn't seem to have such thoughts either. When he woke up from his dream, Li Mu was still reminiscing about the delicious food in his dream. Unfortunately, a dream was still a dream. When he woke up, he couldn't recall the taste of those delicacies. After washing up and eating breakfast, he went to the yamen with Xiao Bai. Li Mu was about to go out on patrol when he saw Mr. Mei and 2 other people outside the government office. Li Mu stepped forward and asked, "Sister Mei, what's the matter?" Mr. Mei said, "Jiangyin County offered a batch of tribute pears yesterday. His Majesty asked me to give you a box." Li Mu was a little flattered. Although it was just a box of pears, it represented His Majesty the Empress's intentions. It meant that she would think of him for such a small matter. During the transportation of this kind of tribute, Fulu would be stuck on the box. Even if it was transported to Shindu, it would be no different from freshly picked ones. Li Mu took one for himself and gave one to Xiao Bai. He took a bite of the tribute pear and found that the pear skin was thin, juicy, and sweet. It was worthy of being chosen as a tribute pear. Mr. Mei said, "If there's nothing else, I'll go back to the palace first." "Wait." Li Mu suddenly stopped her and asked, "Sister Mei, what should I do if I encounter an inner demon in the process of cultivation?" Li Mu knew very little about inner demons. Even Thousand Illusions Shangren was not omniscient. Faced with this kind of thing that he had never encountered in his cultivation, Li Mu did not know how to deal with it for a moment. Although Mr. Mei's cultivation was not as high as Thousand Illusions Shangren's, she was by the Empress's side and must have seen many things. Perhaps she could explain to Li Mu. Inner demon? Mr. Mei frowned and asked, "You encountered an inner demon?" Li Mu nodded. Mr. Mei continued to ask, "What kind of inner demon?" Li Mu described, "Sometimes I dream of a woman." Mr. Mei glanced at him. "Isn't it normal to dream of a woman?" Li Mu explained, "It's not what you think. It's a strange woman. I've dreamed of her more than once. She seems to have independent thoughts and can even control my dreams." "More than once, independent thoughts." Mr. Mei frowned and asked, "Can she control your body?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "That won't happen. That's strange." Mr. Mei said in surprise, "Once an inner demon of this level appears, it will definitely fight for control of the body. If it wins, it will completely control the original body. If it loses, its consciousness will be destroyed. It's very rare for two consciousnesses to coexist." Li Mu asked, "In other words, it's possible for such a situation to exist?" Mr. Mei nodded and said, "As far as I know, there are very few people who have more than two consciousnesses coexisting in their bodies. Most of the time, his body is dominated by the main consciousness, but when he encounters a life and death crisis, the other consciousness will awaken. This kind of second consciousness can sometimes be more terrifying than the main consciousness." Li Mu felt that he was in this situation as Mr. Mei said. In his dreams, the woman could turn the tables and easily beat Li Mu. Her strength was very terrifying. Although the two of them could coexist peacefully for the time being, no one could say for sure what would happen in the future. Li Mu asked, "How do I get rid of this kind of inner demon?" Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "You can only rely on yourself to defeat the inner demon. When your consciousness is strong enough, you can easily erase the consciousness of the inner demon." She looked at Li Mu and asked, "What does your inner demon look like?" Li Mu reached out and swiped in the air. A woman's shadow appeared in the air. This was a small spell that could be mastered in the Jusen stage. It was a weakened version of the art of black light. The art of black light of the cultivators in Dongxian could turn stillness into motion and appear in real time. It could surpass the power of heaven and earth and reappear the past that had already happened. It was said that the most powerful cultivators in the ninth realm could even see the future temporarily through this spell. As for whether it was true or not, Li Mu didn't know. Mr. Mei looked at the woman. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes and his mouth opened slightly. Li Mu saw the change in her expression and had a bad feeling. He asked, What's wrong?" Mr. Mei coughed and his expression returned to normal. He asked, "When did you get this inner demon?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "I think it was the night when His Majesty abolished the substitutes in silver. I met her for the first time in my dream. She tied me up and whipped me." Thinking of what happened in his dream that night, Li Mu still felt a bit aggrieved. Hearing this, Mr. Mei's expression was very strange. It seemed like he wanted to laugh but was trying hard to hold it in. A few black lines appeared on Li Mu's forehead as he asked, "Are you laughing at me?" Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "No, ha ha ha." Seeing Li Mu's serious face, she coughed and said, "I'm not laughing at you. I just thought of something funny. Ha ha ha." She put one hand on Li Mu's shoulder and the other hand on her stomach. After laughing, she said, panting, "Don't worry. There are all kinds of strange things on the road of cultivation. The inner demon isn't all bad. She doesn't want to take over your body. Just think of it as a dream. Isn't it good to go on dates with a beautiful woman in your dreams?" Li Mu asked suspiciously, "Is it really okay?" Mr. Mei patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry. It's okay." Judging from Mr. Mei's tone, she didn't seem to be lying to Li Mu or comforting Li Mu. For now, Li Mu didn't feel that the woman was a threat to him. He shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Mr. Mei said, "Haven't you always wanted to know about His Majesty? Since we're free now, I'll tell you." When Li Mu heard this, he was instantly interested. Mr. Mei said, "Since you're already His Majesty's man, there's something you need to know." Li Mu asked, "What's the matter?" Mr. May said, "People say that His Majesty stole the Emperor's chi from the ancestral temple and used it to transcend and take over the world. You think so too, don't you?" Li Mu asked, "Is there more to it than meets the eye?" Mr. May said, "It's true that His Majesty got the Emperor's chi, but he didn't do it willingly. When he married the former crown prince, became the empress, and obtained the Emperor's chi, it was all part of the Zhou family's scheme." Li Mu really didn't know that there was such an inside story. He continued to listen to Mr. May. The Emperor's chi is condensed from the psyche power of the people of the Great Zhou. The 36 counties of the Great Zhou collect the psyche power of the people through the ancestral temple and gather it in the ancestral temple. It will gradually nurture a strand of Emperor's chi. Obtaining this Emperor's chi can allow mortals to transcend. In the past, it would be passed to the Emperor to ensure the continuation of the Great Zhou dynasty. There were shortcuts to cultivation. Some shortcuts could even allow one to reach the sky in one step. Xiao Yu, with the body of a mortal, was able to move heaven and earth and advance 5 realms in a row. The methods of the royal family of the Great Zhou were obviously more brilliant. They used the psyche power of hundreds of millions of people to cultivate, so that there would always be a powerhouse of the upper realm in the royal family to ensure the continuation of imperial power. However, during the last change of imperial power, this strand of Emperor's chi was obtained by an outsider, causing the Xiao royal family to lose their opportunity. It was no wonder that Her Majesty could succeed the throne so smoothly. After Emperor One, the Great Zhou showed signs of decline. The people's sentiment decreased year by year. The last strand of Emperor's chi was formed after 2 generations of emperors. In other words, the Xiao royal family had not produced a powerhouse of the upper realm for decades. The cultivation of the previous 2 emperors stopped at Dongxian. If there was no powerhouse to guard the country, they would not be able to intimidate the surrounding countries, not to mention the Yao nation and the Ghost realm. Even if the Xiao clan was unwilling, they could only temporarily let the empress succeed the throne. It was precisely because the Zhou family understood this that they were able to take advantage of the Xiao clan. Mr. May looked at Li Mu and said, "You are one of Her Majesty's people. I don't want you to misunderstand Her Majesty like others." Li Mu nodded and said solemnly, "I understand." Mr. May asked, "Besides these, do you have anything else you want to ask?" Li Mu thought for a while and asked, "It is said that the former crown prince likes men, and that he and Her Majesty are only husband and wife on the surface. Is that true?" Chapter 236. Bang! As soon as Li Mu finished speaking, Mr. May hit him on the head. Mr. May glared at him and said, "Didn't I tell you not to criticize Her Majesty? If other internal guards heard you, you would be hung up and beaten." Li Mu rubbed his head and said, "Isn't it right in front of you?" Mr. May snorted and said, "Not even in front of me." Li Mu shook his head and said, Okay, I won't ask any more." Gossiping was human nature. The higher a person's status was, the more people would gossip about them. Not only Li Mu, but many people in Luoyang were gossiping about this. "Okay, I've delivered Her Majesty's reward. I'm going back to the palace." Mr. May looked at him angrily and said, "Her Majesty is as pure as ice and as pure as jade. Don't talk about her behind her back. Not only can you not talk about her, but you can't let others talk about her either." Li Mu stood up straight and said seriously, "Yes, Your Majesty." He called her sister May all the time, and it was not in vain. In the end, she answered Li Mu indirectly to satisfy his gossiping. A pure as ice and as pure as jade solved Li Mu's doubts. The fire of gossip was extinguished. Li Mu saw Zhang Chun standing at the door of the side hall and asked, "Sir, do you want to eat a pear? This pear is very sweet. It's the tribute pear given by Her Majesty." Zhang Chun walked out and asked, "What did you do? Why did Her Majesty suddenly reward you?" Li Mu said, "Nothing. Maybe there are too many tribute pears in Jiangyin County and Her Majesty can't finish them all." Hearing this, Zhang Chun looked at Li Mu and wanted to spit at him. Even if Her Majesty could not finish the tribute pears and wanted to reward the officials, there was no reason for her to skip over him, the magistrate of Luoyang, and reward the arrestor of Luoyang. Moreover, Her Majesty rewarding a house and a box of pears were two completely different things. Because of their meritorious service, His Majesty had rewarded many people with residences. Although the value of this box of pears was very low and could not be compared to the official residence, it represented the emperor's heart. This meant that His Majesty still had Li Mu in his heart. Even if he did not make any contributions, His Majesty might still think of him when he woke up, slept, or ate. What kind of heavenly grace was this? Zhang Chun took a pear and took a bite. What kind of tribute pear is this? It's so sour. He put the pear in his mouth, grabbed 2 more pears from the box with both hands, and left. Xiao Bai chewed on the pear and said, "This pear is obviously very sweet. It's not sour at all, Li Mu. Maybe he just happened to pick a sour one?" He waved his hand at Wang Wu at the door and said, "These are the tribute pears bestowed by His Majesty. Take them and distribute them among your brothers." It was just a box of tribute pears, but it was a sharp weapon to win people's hearts. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he could win over a wave of people's hearts for himself and Her Majesty. Mr. Mei was right. Many people criticized the process of the Empress seizing the throne. Even most of the officials in Great Zhou did not like to see a woman become the Empress. Li Mu said to the people who had been summoned by Wang Wu, "After eating, go out and patrol. If you find any illegal behavior that you can't handle, come to me." The constables each took a pear and said to Li Mu, "Thank you, boss." Li Mu waved his hand. "This is a reward from Her Majesty. If you want to thank someone, thank Her Majesty." Imperial Palace. Changle Hall. In the void of the hall, there was a picture quietly flowing. The young female official snorted and said, "This person is rude to Her Majesty again. Why don't we take him to the internal guards and teach him a good lesson?" Mr. Mei came in from outside the hall. Seeing the scene of the Luoyang government and hearing the young female official's words, he already realized what had happened. He said, "Your Majesty, although Li Mu's words are a bit presumptuous, he is absolutely loyal to Your Majesty. He always protects Your Majesty and thinks that Your Majesty." The young female official said with a cold face, "If we don't teach him a good lesson this time, who knows what other offensive words he will say to Your Majesty in the future." The Empress looked calm, as if she was not angry at all. She just said, "Mei Wei, send him another box of tribute pears tomorrow." Mr. Mei bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." The young female official said angrily, Your Majesty will leave first." Mr. Mei took her hand and pulled her out of the hall. The young female official shook off his hand and said unhappily, "He was disrespectful to Your Majesty. Why are you always protecting him?" Mr. Mei said to her, "If Your Majesty wants to punish him, she will. We don't have to do anything about it." The young female official said angrily, "What's so good about him? He was disrespectful to Your Majesty. You protect him, and Your Majesty is so tolerant of him. Not only did she give him the tribute pears that Your Majesty likes to eat, but she also used the dark light technique to look at him." Her chest heaved up and down. Obviously, she was very angry. For someone like her who worshipped the Empress, it was hard for her to accept all this. "Shoo!" Mr. Mei made a shushing gesture and said, "It's because he was disrespectful to Your Majesty that Your Majesty treats him differently from others." The young female official frowned. Obviously, she didn't understand what he meant. Mr. Mei explained, "You're still young. There are some things that you don't understand. It's lonely at the top. When Your Majesty is in that position, everyone, including us, respects and fears her. After a long time, Your Majesty will get tired. Sometimes, what she needs is someone who disrespects her." The young female official said, "What kind of twisted logic is that?" Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "Your Majesty didn't want to be in this position. She's much lonelier than we thought. In front of us, she only shows one side, but in fact, the side that she hides is the real her." Li Mu walked out of the government office. He looked up at the sky and scratched his head in confusion. Since just now, he had a strange feeling that someone was spying on him in the dark. This feeling came and went. Li Mu searched for a long time, but he couldn't find the source. In this situation, either he had an illusion, or the spying person's cultivation was much higher than his and used a high-level magic like the art of mystic light. The latter was unlikely. Li Mu had the jade pendant given to him by the Empress. It could isolate heaven's secrets, block the calculations of transcendent cultivators, and also block the art of mystic light. After leaving the government office, this feeling disappeared completely. He patrolled the government office with Xiao Bai. At night, when he was sitting cross-legged on the bed to cultivate, sleepiness suddenly attacked him. Li Mu had experienced this feeling of sleepiness for no reason several times. He already knew what would happen next. Sure enough, after a mist appeared in front of him, the woman's figure appeared in front of Li Mu. She stretched out her hands, and a whip appeared in her hands. It was a whip that Li Mu hadn't seen for a long time. Li Mu's eyelids twitched, and his expression changed greatly. He immediately said, "What do you want?" The woman said indifferently, "Nothing. I just want to exchange pointers with you." "What exchange?" It was clearly a one-sided trampling. Li Mu quickly stretched out his hand and said, "Stop. Even if you want to exchange pointers, you don't have to use force. We can exchange pointers." The woman glanced at him and asked, "What kind of grammar?" Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "Do you know how to play Go?" The woman said, "I know a little about the rules." Li Mu closed his eyes and meditated. A stone table and 2 stone chairs appeared in front of them. A chessboard was carved on the stone table, and next to the chessboard was a chessboard. Li Mu picked up a black piece and placed it in the corner of the chessboard. He immediately said, "It's your turn." In the dream, Li Mu couldn't beat her. He could only make a prompt decision and make the decision for her. Although Li Mu's Go skills weren't high, it was still easy for him to beat a rookie who knew a little about the rules. The woman glanced at Li Mu, picked up the white piece and placed it in another place. Li Mu sighed in relief. He suspected that today was a special day for her every month. Fortunately, he was quick-witted and made a prompt decision to avoid being trampled on by her. After a moment, the woman placed a single word and said to Li Mu, "You lost." Li Mu stared blankly at the chessboard. Only then did he realize that what she said about knowing a little about the rules and what he understood were not the same at all. The woman looked at him and shook her head. "It's boring to exchange pointers. Let's exchange pointers." "Wait." Li Mu stretched out his hand again and said, "1 game doesn't mean anything. We'll win 2 out of 3 games." He closed his eyes and concentrated. The chessboard on the table suddenly changed, and the boundary between Chu and Han appeared. The woman looked at the strange chessboard and asked, "What is this?" "Chinese chess." There was no such thing as Chinese chess in this world. Li Mu smiled and said, "If you don't know how, I can teach you." The woman learned very quickly. Li Mu only explained the rules of Chinese chess to her once, and she was already able to move. Of course, after 20 moves, she lost to Li Mu. Li Mu sighed in relief and clasped his fist. "Thank you for letting me win. I admit it." The woman didn't even raise her head. She rearranged the pieces and said, "Again." Although it was a bit shameless to attack her weakness with his strength, Li Mu could only be shameless once in order to not be trampled on. This time, the woman played very slowly. After 30 moves, Li Mu frowned. He didn't expect her to learn so quickly. If this continued, he was afraid that he would lose this game. He picked up a chess piece, thought for a moment, and ate one of her pieces. The woman looked at him and asked, "Why can your pawn take 2 moves?" Li Mu explained, "You don't know, right? This pawn is an elite. Can take 2 moves." The woman didn't say anything and continued playing. Li Mu picked up a chess piece and ate another one of her pieces. The woman frowned. "Why does your horse move I but not son?" Li Mu explained, "This is only a fine horse. It can move I." The woman didn't say anything and moved the chess piece again. Li Mu's carriage turned and ate her piece. She looked up at Li Mu and asked, "Why doesn't your carriage go in a straight line?" Li Mu smiled and asked, "Isn't it common knowledge that a carriage can turn?" The woman was silent for a moment. She stretched out her hand and the whip appeared again. She stood up and looked at Li Mu. "Show your weapon." Chapter 237. During breakfast, Xiaobai saw Li Mu's tired face and asked, "Savior, did you not sleep well last night?" Li Mu said listlessly, "I'm fine. I just had a nightmare last night." A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the ocean, even if it was a woman he imagined. Li Mu did not know how he had offended her. She was fine last night, but then she turned hostile again and tormented Li Mu for most of the night. If it was just a night without sleep, it was nothing to Li Mu now. He could still be energetic if he did not sleep for 10 days or half a month. However, excessive mental exhaustion in the dream would also affect reality. Last night, he had fought more than 300 rounds with the inner demon. He had even mastered the use of the mantra a lot. Although he was a little mentally exhausted, he had gained a lot. After breakfast, he returned to the yamen with Xiaobai. Li Mu learned from Wang Wu that the Empress had sent another box of tribute pears early in the morning. Li Mu was a little confused. How did the Empress know that he liked pears? He was actually a little reluctant to share the tribute pears with everyone yesterday. He did not need to share this box of pears with them. He and Xiaobai would take it home to eat at night. After that, he returned to his room, changed into his official uniform, and went out to patrol while collecting psychokinesis. Cultivation after the omnipotent realm was much harder than he had imagined. Li Qing did not take long to advance from the omnipotent realm to the omnipotent realm. Although her talent was not as good as Li Mu's, she had already built a solid foundation after more than 10 years of accumulation. Li Mu adjusted his train of thought. After experiencing the rapid advancement, he was indeed a little impatient for success during this period of time. Although there were shortcuts in cultivation, pursuing them too much would also create hidden dangers for oneself. If Li Mu's mana was cultivated step by step like Li Qing, the inner demon would not have a chance to invade at all. He felt that his cultivation was slow, but it was actually only compared to before. In reality, to be able to enter the third realm of cultivation at such a young age was definitely not slow. Moreover, he had not been cultivating for long. Most cultivators would cultivate their entire lives and only reach the omnipotent realm. Li Mu originally wanted Xiaobai to stay in the yamen to cultivate, but she had to follow Li Mu on patrol. Li Mu did not know whether she simply wanted to stick to him or to be Lu Hanyan's spy. She wanted to follow Li Mu and keep an eye on him so that he did not flirt with other women. Li Mu had always been strictly abiding by Lu Hanyan's promise. In the 2 months in the Immortals' capital, apart from Xiao, Mr. Mei do not count. Although plum blossoms were flowers, Mr. Mei did not count. If she were a few years older, she would be old enough to be Li Mu's mother. After leaving the yamen, Li Mu walked along the main street, patrolling the area. The Immortals' capital was divided into districts called markets by the crisscrossing streets. So far, Li Mu had only been to less than 30% of the markets. There was no strict distinction between markets. Each market was both a residential area and a commercial area. In a market, residential, living, and entertainment functions were available. It could satisfy the daily needs of most people. These markets had different functions. Most of them were for the common people to live in, while the rest had their own functions. For example, the South Court and North Court, which occupied more than 10 markets, were for the rich and powerful. They were close to the palace and had the best location. The scenery was beautiful and the environment was quiet. There were also some high-end markets that were for the entertainment of the rich and powerful. Ordinary people could not afford them. Some high-end brothels, music halls, dance halls, and restaurants would only appear in these markets. Different from other markets, the brothels here wouldn't have brothels and girls standing at the entrance to solicit customers. When the customers entered, they wouldn't get straight to the point. They would usually talk about life and dreams first, which would take a longer time and cost more money. As for music halls and dance halls, they were places where the cultured gathered. In the Immortals' capital, those who were qualified to be cultured were the rich. Li Mu heard this from Wang Wu. It was said that in some brothels, besides human women, there were also demons and ghosts. As long as one had enough money, They could satisfy all kinds of people's hobbies. The Immortals' capital was not a one-sided place. To some people it was hell, but to others it was heaven. The peaceful market that Li Mu and Xiaobai were in was a high-end market that gathered brothels, music halls, dance halls, and restaurants. There were not many ordinary people on the streets. There was an endless stream of carriages passing by. Those who passed by were either the rich and powerful or the young officials. The constables of the Immortals' capital liked this kind of market very much. This was because those who came in and out of these markets were all people of status. Many of them thought that they were cultured. This made these markets more orderly. There were very few cases, so there was no need to pay too much attention to them. Since he could not obtain more psyche power here, Li Mu still wanted to take root among the ordinary people. Just as he was about to leave with Xiaobai, he heard a melodious tune. Li Mu stopped and stood on the street, listening carefully. This was not the first time Li Mu had heard this tune. When he was in the northern region, Lu Hanyan often played it for him. When he heard this tune, Li Mu began to miss her. Xiaobai hugged her sword and listened for a while. She said, "Sister Lu played this tune before." Li Mu looked in the direction of the music. His gaze finally stopped in front of a music hall called Great Music Hall. Li Mu had heard this name many times from Lu Hanyan. When she was young, she was sold to a music hall by her parents. The name of the music hall was Great Music Hall. That was where she and Wanwan grew up. They had lived there for more than 10 years. Standing in front of the Great Music Hall, Li Mu suddenly wanted to go in and see the place where they used to live. He walked into the music hall. A beautiful girl came up to him and asked, "Do you want to listen to music?" Li Mu asked, "How many great music halls are there in the Immortals' capital?" The girl was stunned for a moment. Then she said, "Only one." There was only one great music hall in the Immortals' capital. Li Mu and Xiaobai could not be wrong. He smiled at the girl and said, "Let's listen to music." The girl smiled and asked, "Do you have a musician you like? Would you like a musician to play for you in the private room or in the hall with the other guests?" Li Mu's family owned a music hall. Naturally, he was not unfamiliar with the business model here. When they arrived at the music hall, the guests could listen to music in the hall according to the music hall's arrangement. They could also choose one or several musicians to play for them in the private room. Of course, the latter was more expensive. It usually cost dozens of taels of silver. Sitting in the hall and listening to music for 2 hours would cost at most a few taels of silver. An ordinary family's annual expenses were only 10 taels of silver. The expenses here were astronomical for ordinary people. Of course, to the rich people in the Immortals' capital, this was nothing. Li Mu certainly would not spend dozens of taels of silver to listen to a song. He decisively chose the latter. The girl smiled and said, "Please follow me." She led the two of them through a screen and into a hall. The music hall would arrange a fixed number of songs every day and charge according to the seats. The closer to the musicians, the more expensive the seats were. The seats in the back corner were the cheapest. Li Mu and Xiaobai chose a seat in the middle. They ordered a pot of tea and a stack of pastries and preserved fruits. They sat in their seats and waited quietly. There were not many guests in the hall. There were only about a dozen of them. They all had extraordinary auras. Li Mu did not know any of them. He only knew a few of the children of the officials in the Immortals' capital. He did not know most of them. After all, many officials were very strict with their children. They would not let them run amok in the Immortals' capital. Li Mu naturally did not have the chance to know them. He looked at the stage in front of him. Not long ago, Lu Hanyan should have been there. He worked hard every day to save enough money for her freedom. Then, he left the Immortals' capital and came to the North County, where he met Li Mu. The musicians had not yet gone on stage and the performance had not started. The guests below the stage occasionally chatted with each other. Miss Enin's skills are getting better and better. Listening to her play is a great enjoyment in life. Miss Enin has improved a lot in the past half year. Many people are here for her. Ever since Miss Hanyan left, the Great Music Bar has been promoting Miss Enin. In half a year, she became the star of the Great Music Bar. Miss Han Yen is worthy of being the #1 musician in the Immortals' capital. Unfortunately, she suddenly disappeared a year ago and no one knows where she went. I also miss Miss Han Yen. Li Mu drank his tea. He did not expect to hear Lu Hanyan's name from these people. Wan said that she was proficient in all kinds of musical instruments and was very famous in the Immortals' capital. It was not an exaggeration at all. Lu Hanyan had never bragged about this. Li Mu also only knew about it now. Not long after, a woman hugged a Guqin and walked up to the stage. The discussions below gradually stopped. Zhang. When the sound of the Guqin entered their ears, their minds couldn't help but be shaken. Li Mu looked at the woman on the stage and smiled. Although it was his first time meeting Miss Yin, he had heard about her many times from Lu Hanyan. This caused Li Mu to feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity even though it was his first time meeting her. In the music bar there were many small groups. Yin and Lu Hanyan were close like sisters. Li Mu looked at her as if she was his sister-in-law. After the song ended, the woman on the stage stood up and bowed to the guests below. She said gently, "Thank you for coming. Yin will take her leave." She walked down the stage and was about to leave with her Guqin. A young man sitting in the front row suddenly stood up and said, "Miss Yin, I am from the 100 Rivers Academy. I have admired you for a long time. I hope you can give me a chance." Yin hugged her Guqin and took 2 steps back. She apologized. "Young master, I am sorry. Yin's status is lowly. I am not worthy of you," the young man said. "I am not marrying you as my wife. You can be my concubine." Yin shook her head and said, "I am sorry. Yin has no plans to marry." The young man took a step forward and said, "What's so good about playing for others here? If you follow me, you will enjoy endless glory and wealth. Do you still need to suffer like this?" Yin took 2 steps back and said hurriedly, "I like this place very much. I have no intention of leaving." A trace of anger appeared on the young man's face. He reached out and wanted to grab her wrist, but his shoulder was pressed down from behind. Li Mu used a little force and the young man was pulled behind him. The young man said angrily, "What are you doing?" Li Mu asked back, "What are you doing in broad daylight?" Li Mu's official uniform still had some effect. The young man said, "I am pursuing Miss Yin. Why? Is this against the law?" Li Mu said, "It is not against the law to pursue a girl, but if you force her when she is unwilling, it is different." The young man frowned. Just as he was about to say something, someone ran over to him and whispered something in his ear. The young man's face changed. He glanced at Li Mu, but didn't say anything and hurriedly left. Although he was in the academy, he had heard of the name Li Mu before. This was a complete lunatic who was not afraid of anything. Although he was not afraid of the constables of the Luoyang government, he did not want to provoke a lunatic. After the young man left, Miss Yin was relieved. She put down her Guqin and bowed to Li Mu. She said gratefully, "Thank you for helping me out. It is my duty to protect the people of Luoyang." Li Mu smiled and looked at her. "Moreover, Hanyan's friends are my friends. If you encounter any problems in the future, you can come to the Luoyang government to find me." Although Lu Hanyan said that he was not allowed to fool around in Luoyang, standing up for her good sister could not be considered as fooling around. Moreover, as a constable, Li Mu had the duty to protect the people of Luoyang. Hearing Lu Hanyan's name, Miss Yin was stunned. Then, she looked up at Li Mu and asked in surprise, "Sir, do you know Sister Lu? Where is she now? Is she okay?" Li Mu said, "She and Wan are in the North County. They are both fine." Hearing Wan's name, Yin did not have any doubts that the person in front of her knew Lu Hanyan. Her expression was a bit agitated and angry. She said, "She left without even saying goodbye. How can she be a good sister?" Lu Hanyan had mentioned this to Li Mu. Although her experience in the music house was a bit bumpy, she had made a few good friends in the past 10 years. She did not want to face the scene of parting. After redeeming herself, she left quietly with Wan without telling anyone. From Miss Yin's reaction, the feelings between them should be sincere. Hearing Lu Hanyan's news, Yin was clearly a little agitated. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. She wiped her eyes and said, "They left without saying anything. They made me worry for so long. They're two weak women. What if they encounter bad people?" Li Mu's lips curled up. The two of them were no longer weak women. One had a pure Yin body and the other had natural spirit eyes. They had countless treasures on them. Bad people were probably more afraid of meeting them. After a while, Yin looked up at Li Mu and asked curiously, "Sir, how do you know Sister Hanyan?" Li Mu explained, "I was transferred from the North County to the Divine Capital a month ago. Before that, I was with Hanyan and Wanwan in the North County." From his words, it seemed that he was very close to Sister Lu and Wanwan. Yin looked at Li Mu and asked curiously, "May I ask what is the relationship between Sir and Sister Hanyan?" Li Mu smiled and said, "She is my fiancée." "Ah!" Yin exclaimed and covered her mouth. Her eyes were filled with surprise and shock. After she came back to her senses, she did not even care about her zither and quickly ran backstage. In the hall, there were still some guests who had not left. When they heard the conversation between the two, most of them were stunned. "No way, Miss Hanyan is his fiancée? How is that possible? He must be talking nonsense. Is he worthy of Lady Lu? A toad lusting after a swan's flesh. You look so. So what if you're pretty? Is Miss Lu such a superficial person?" Li Mu heard a clamor. These people looked at him with unkind eyes and there was a sour smell in the air. Soon, there were messy footsteps from backstage. Yin ran out with a few girls. Where is Sister Hanyan's husband? Hey, don't push me. Let me see first." A few girls ran out from backstage and surrounded Li Mu. They sized him up from head to toe. "He looks okay. He is worthy of Sister Hanyan. But he is a little young. He is at least 3 years younger than Sister Hanyan. Hey, a woman 3 years older than you. Age is not a problem." Yin coughed and said, "Be careful. Don't be rude to brother-in-law." One of the girls looked at Li Mu and said in disbelief, "Are you really Sister Hanyan's husband?" Li Mu said, "Not yet." The girl said, "How can you prove it?" Li Mu waved his hand and the images of Lu Hanyan and Wanwan appeared in front of them. "Ah, brother-in-law knows magic. It is Sister Hanyan and Wanwan." "Wanwan, this little girl, why did her face become round again? Is brother-in-law a cultivator? No one dares to pester Sister Hanyan anymore." Li Mu's move completely shocked the girls and confirmed his identity. They immediately became well-behaved in front of Li Mu. "Hello, brother-in-law. I am Miao Miao. I am Xin. I am 16. Brother-in-law, just call me Little 7. Lu Hanyan had entered the music house very early. Some of the girls in the same batch as her had already left. Some of them had taken advantage of their youth to marry into rich families as concubines. Some had even become someone else's mistress. Her age and qualifications were very high in the music house. After coming to the music house, she had a few more sisters-in-law. Feeling their sincere feelings, Li Mu was also happy for Lu Hanyan. He smiled at the girls and said, "Hanyan will come to the Divine Capital in about a year. You will be able to see her then. My name is Li Mu. I work in the Divine Capital. If you encounter any trouble, you can come to the Divine Capital to find me." Miao Miao's face was filled with doubt. She muttered, "Li Mu, I seem to have heard this name before." Soon, she recalled something. Yin and the others were also shocked. Brother-in-law is Li Mu. The Li Mu who took care of those officials' children and caused a ruckus in the Ministry of Justice? Brother-in-law made the heavens strike Zhou Chu to death. He even scolded Assistant Minister Zhou in the Ministry of Justice. Oh my God, I was just watching the show outside the Ministry of Justice that day. Soon, the girls' eyes began to sparkle as they looked at Li Mu. For more than a month, the people living in the Divine Capital might not have seen Li Mu, but they had definitely heard of his name. He took care of those rich kids, caused a ruckus in the Ministry of Justice, forced some officials to change the law, and abolished the silver for crimes. He had fundamentally sought the well-being of the people. He had avenged the wronged and caused the wrath of the heavens to strike Zhou Chuchu to death. He had gotten rid of a great evil for the divine capital. Countless people had seen it with their own eyes. Although they had never seen him, they were already filled with admiration for him. Inin's eyes widened. She looked at Li Mu and asked, "Brother-in-law, are you really that Li Mu?" Li Mu smiled. "There is only one person called Li Mu in the divine capital." "Wow, brother-in-law is so powerful. Let's see who dares to pester and bully us in the future." Little 7 and 16 were the youngest. They were only 16 or 17 years old. They jumped up happily and pulled Li Mu's arm. They cheered and said, "We have a backer in the future." Xiaobai stood at the side and watched anxiously. However, these people were Sister Lu's friends, so she could only watch anxiously. Li Mu was not good at dealing with this kind of situation. He pulled his hands back and said, "All right, I still have to go out and patrol. If you encounter any trouble, remember to find me at the government office." Li Mu had stayed in the music house for a while. He bid farewell to the girls and left the wonderful sound pavilion with Xiaobai. "Brother-in-law, goodbye. Come here often to see us. We'll save the best spot for you. It's free." Inin looked at his back and said, "I didn't expect Sister Han Yen to have found a husband. I'm really happy for her." Little 7 said, "Brother-in-law is really powerful. That day outside the Ministry of Justice, I heard him scolding Assistant Minister Zhou in front of the Ministry of Justice. That's the Zhou family. Other than brother-in-law, who in the divine capital would dare to offend the Zhou family?" 16's face was filled with happiness. She said, "Hee, it's good that brother-in-law is powerful. Let's see who dares to bully us in the future." Although the status of musicians and performers in the hearts of people was better than prostitutes who used their beauty to entertain people, they were still inferior. Although there were many officials and nobles who came to the music house to listen to music, there were only a few who really looked up to them. As musicians, it was common to be harassed when they went out to play. Among them, some guests would be polite and some guests would be overboard. Many of the musicians who were not famous had been molested. There were even musicians who were sullied by guests when they were playing for guests alone in the pavilion. However, that guest had a powerful background and the music house could only let it go. As musicians, they had no sense of security. In fact, they were very envious of Sister Han Yen who could control her own fate. At this time, Xin suddenly thought of something and said, "The female constable by brother-in-law's side is so beautiful. Even I can't help but like her." Miao Miao said, "She's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. Even those clothes can't hide her beauty. How can Sister Han Yen be at ease with leaving such a girl by brother-in-law's side?" Little 7 thought about it and said, "Brother-in-law is alone in the divine capital. We have to help Sister Han Yen keep an eye on him. We can't let other little vixens take brother-in-law away." Chapter 238. Ever since he lost to Li Mu in a game of chess, the woman in his dream flew into a rage out of humiliation and ravaged him. She had not appeared for several days. Her time of appearance was very irregular, and her emotions were also very complicated and changeable. Sometimes she was calm, and sometimes she was manic. This caused Li Mu to be alarmed even before he slept. However, this woman was not as scary as the description of the inner demon in the book. Even though Li Mu could not defeat her in his dream, his mastery of various Dao techniques and supernatural powers was becoming more and more refined. Mantras and abhijna could be improved gradually through daily practice. However, there was a limit to this improvement. When fighting with others, the situation could change in an instant. No matter how skilled one was in daily practice, it was inevitable that one would be flustered in a real battle. Actual combat was the best way to improve one's strength. However, actual combat meant danger. In reality, when one was fighting with one's life, all of one's previous efforts would be for naught if they failed once. In the past, Li Mu had Su He to teach him moves. Now that they were separated, Li Mu also lost an opponent who could train him. Until he met the woman in his dream. Dreams were illusory. No matter what happened in the dream, it would not affect reality. However, experience in fights of magical powers was really accumulating. He could completely use the inner demon as his own whetstone to help him increase his experience in fighting enemies. After thinking this through, Li Mu looked forward to her appearance. Unfortunately, his inner demon was different. Whether it appeared or not was completely a probability event. There was no rule to speak of. In the morning, he and Xiao Bai patrolled more than a dozen markets and only mediated a few neighborhood disputes. The two of them ate outside. When they passed by the great music lane, they came in and sat for a while. Lu Hanyan's former sisters were very enthusiastic about Li Mu. Xiao Bai looked at them nervously. Is Sister Hanyan still like before? Only eating a little every day? Wan must have gained weight, right? Sister Hanyan said that she would open her own music lane in the future. Did she open it in the end? The few of them surrounded Li Mu and asked all sorts of questions about Lu Hanyan. Li Mu answered them one by one. Yinin said with some envy, I really envy Sister Hanyan. She is finally living the life she wants. Li Mu. If you want, that's fine too. Chimey shook its head and said, after Sister Hanyan redeemed herself and left, the business was greatly affected. If we redeem ourselves now, it won't be so easy. The owner won't let us go so easily. Xian also said, we also can't earn as much money as Sister Hanyan. In order to redeem herself, she played for 12 hours a day. She really didn't even care about her life. Li Mu felt a little distressed. He knew that Lu Hanyan had suffered all these years, but he didn't expect it to be so bitter. She looked weak, but she was actually very stubborn. As long as she set her mind on something, no matter how difficult it was, she would persevere and complete it. And once she made a decision, very few people could make her change her mind. After a while, two figures came down from upstairs. The two girls said happily, we are going to play together later. Brother-in-law, do you want to stay and watch? Li Mu, no, I still have work to do. I will leave in a while. The two girls revealed a disappointed expression. Li Mu noticed that little Seven's forehead was bruised. He asked, what happened to your forehead? Little Seven lowered her head and shook it. It's fine. Chimey and Xian's lips trembled, but they didn't say anything in the end. Li Mu sensed that something was amiss and asked, what happened? The girls lowered their heads and didn't say anything. Only the youngest, 16, said angrily, it's all because of that Jiangzhe. He ordered Sister Little Seven to play a solo in the private room and wanted to force himself on Sister Little Seven. Luckily, we heard Sister Little Seven's shout and rushed in to stop him. Sister Little Seven's head hit the headboard and was bleeding. Li Mu asked, didn't you report it to the authorities? Chimey sighed. The owner reported it to the authorities. Then the Ministry of Justice came and took Jiangzhe away. We saw him walk out of the Ministry of Justice with our own eyes. The Ministry of Justice didn't dare to offend the academy. Li Mu frowned. Why didn't you come to me? 16 lowered her head and touched her fingertips. She whispered, Jiangzhe is a student of the academy. Sister Yinin said that we can't offend the academy. She didn't want us to cause trouble for brother-in-law. After coming to Luoyang, Li Mu was least afraid of trouble. On the contrary, he was afraid of no trouble at all. These days, the psychokinesis he obtained from the people had been decreasing day by day. He just needed to do something to bring him back to the people's sight. Li Mu's face darkened. He said, how dare they protect such a villain? Come, follow me to the Ministry of Justice. Little Seven looked up at him and shook her head. Forget it, brother-in-law. I'm fine. Li Mu said, no, we can't just let this go. Otherwise, people will bully you in the future. Chimey sighed and persuaded Li Mu. We are of low status and have long been used to it. The Luoyang now is not the Luoyang of the past. They won't dare to go too far. Li Mu shook his head. If I don't do anything while you are bullied, how am I going to explain it to Sister Lu? Don't be afraid. It's just the Ministry of Justice. With me here, justice will be served. Little Seven said, brother-in-law? Li Mu asked, Don't you trust me? Little Seven bit her lips and finally said, I'll listen to brother-in-law. Under the lead of Li Mu and Xiao Bai, a group of people walked out of Great Music Lane and went to the Ministry of Justice. After a while, a middle-aged woman ran out of Great Music Lane and said in fear, It's over, it's over. These ignorant girls want to kill me. As a constable, Li Mu's duty was to clean up all the injustices in the Luoyang. Even if Little Seven wasn't Lu Hanyan's sister, he wouldn't sit by and do nothing. Moreover, Lu Hanyan's sister was his sister. Otherwise, when she came to the Luoyang in the future, how could Li Mu raise his head in front of her? It would have been more convenient for the Luoyang government to take over this case. However, Li Mu thought about it. Lord Zhang was from the academy. If it involved the academy's case, it might be difficult for him. Moreover, this case was clearly a hot potato. After coming to the Luoyang, Li Mu had caused enough trouble for Lord Zhang. Lord Zhang had treated him well. If he threw this big trouble to him, it would be too inhumane. When Li Mu walked on the streets, he would attract a lot of attention. Many people even went up to greet him. When he walked through the streets with a few beautiful girls, 100% of the people turned to look at him. Some of the Luoyang citizens couldn't help but ask, Constable Li, where are we going? Li Mu replied, The Ministry of Justice. When the crowd heard that, they perked up. There was going to be a good show to watch. Ever since Constable Li came to the Luoyang, they had gotten used to the bustle. They weren't used to it after so many days of peace. For a moment, the citizens who had nothing to do followed Li Mu to the Ministry of Justice from afar. When the butcher on the street saw this, he slammed his boning knife on the chopping board and said to the waiter of the tea house next door, Watch my stall. I'm going to watch the show. Although the waiter of the tea house also wanted to watch the show, if he left, the shopkeeper would definitely deduct his money. When he turned back to look at the counter, he realized that the shopkeeper was gone. At the entrance of the Ministry of Justice's Yamen, when the two gatekeepers saw the crowd of citizens heading toward the Ministry of Justice, led by Li Mu from the Luoyang Yamen, they immediately felt a headache coming on. They turned around and ran into the Yamen without hesitation. Li Mu walked to the entrance of the Ministry of Justice, bent down, picked up the drumstick, and hit the drum hard. Puffed. Inside the Ministry of Justice, the director of the Ministry of Justice was drinking tea. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of tea. He put down the teacup, stood up, and said angrily, Who's hitting the drum outside? Although the drum outside the Ministry of Justice was for the citizens to cry out their grievances, it didn't make much noise on normal days. The sound of the drum was annoying. It was fine if it interrupted the director of the Ministry of Justice's work, but if he was in the middle of an important activity and was startled by the drum, the consequences would be unimaginable. The Yamen had a rule that anyone who wanted to hit the drum would be stopped and interrogated. If they had any grievances, they would have to talk about it. The director of the Ministry of Justice's pants were wet. When he saw the gatekeeper running in, he said angrily, What are you doing? Why didn't you stop someone from hitting the drum? The gatekeeper said in distress, Sir, the one who hit the drum is Li Mu. I didn't dare to stop him. The director of the Ministry of Justice was shocked. What's Li Mu doing here again? After the incident with Zhou Chu, he gave up on the idea of avenging his humiliation on Li Mu. He could even summon the heavenly lightning to help him. This ability was too terrifying. The officials of the Ministry of Justice privately called him the Lightning King. He didn't have to pay with his life even if he killed someone. After all, the heavens were the scapegoat. Who would dare to make the heavens pay with their life? The director of the Ministry of Justice had cultivated for 30 years, but he was only at the 4th level. He couldn't take more than a few purple heavenly lightning strikes. The director of the Ministry of Justice quickly said, Go out and tell him that I'm not here. Tell him to go back. Li Mu walked in from outside and said, Sir Yang, how can you be like this? The crime of neglecting your duty is not light. The director of the Ministry of Justice looked at Li Mu, who was still holding the drumstick in his hand. He knew that he couldn't avoid it today. He gritted his teeth and asked, What are you doing here? Li Mu said, I want to report a case. In the court of the Ministry of Justice, The director of the Ministry of Justice sat above and asked Li Mu, as the constable of the divine capital, why didn't you report a case to the divine capital? Why did you come to the Ministry of Justice? Li Mu said, because this case is related to the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu held Shao Qi's hand and said, this morning, Jiang Zhe, a student of the 100 River Academy, wanted to rape my sister in the Great Music Lane. He was stopped and handed over to the Ministry of Justice. However, the Ministry of Justice let him go. Sir, don't you have an explanation for this? The director of the Ministry of Justice glanced at him and said, he didn't succeed. I've already reprimanded him. What else do you want? Li Mu's face darkened. He asked, Sir Yang, you're the director of the Ministry of Justice. You should know that the crime of attempted rape is not much lighter than rape. How can the Ministry of Justice let him go so easily? The director of the Ministry of Justice said, according to Jiang Zhe, he was confused for a moment after drinking and then realized it himself. According to the law, Jiang Zhe took the initiative to stop the violence. This is not considered attempted rape. Is my judgment wrong? Li Mu said, Sir, don't you think it's a bit hasty to close the case based on Jiang Zhe's one-sided statement? The director of the Ministry of Justice said indifferently, I'm the director of the Ministry of Justice. You're just a small constable. Do I need you to teach me how to judge a case? Well, Li Mu pointed at the director of the Ministry of Justice and said loudly, as an official of the Ministry of Justice, it's bad enough that you don't make decisions for the people. How can you be in cahoots with such a villain? He pointed at the top of his head and said angrily, damned God, if you have eyes, you can punish such a muddle-headed official. The director of the Ministry of Justice's expression changed drastically. He jumped down from the table and covered Li Mu's mouth. He said in horror, let's talk nicely. Constable Li, don't do this. Chapter 239. Li Mu was just putting on an act. He glanced at the director and said, it was you who didn't talk to me properly first? The director wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said, it's just a small case. There's no need to trouble the heavens. It's not necessary, really not necessary. Li Mu said seriously, perhaps it's just a small case to you, sir, but to me it concerns my sister's innocence and even her life. Do you think it's not necessary? The director said awkwardly, when did you have a sister? Li Mu said calmly, I just recognized her as my sworn sister. Let's talk about it slowly. The director pointed at a constable and said, bring a chair for Constable Li. After going through so many things, he completely understood. Li Mu did not purposely go against the old party. Today, he dared to make a scene in the Ministry of Justice and offend the old party. Tomorrow, he dared to offend the new party and strike the disciples of the Zhou family into pieces. He did not belong to any party or power. He was just a reckless young man who did not care about his life. He had no grudges with Li Mu in the past. It was just a small conflict. There was no need for him to risk his life. The constable brought a chair. After Li Mu sat down, the director said, I was wrong just now. Don't take it to heart, Constable Li. Jiang Zhe is a student of the academy. The academy has a high status. Without the academy's permission, if the Ministry of Justice detained their student, I would not be able to withstand the pressure from the people, the imperial court, and other parties. Li Mu asked, are you going to let such a villain go unpunished because you're worried about offending people? The director thought for a while and suddenly said, Luoyang Magistrate Zhang Chun is upright and outspoken. He is not afraid of the powerful. Why don't the Ministry of Justice send this case to the Luoyang government? You can do whatever you want, Li Mu said. Since the Ministry of Justice has already made a judgment, I don't think it's a good idea to pass it on to the Luoyang government. If the files are messed up, wouldn't a simple case become more complicated? The director of the Ministry of Justice sighed and said, your sister is only slightly injured. Why does Arrestor Li have to offend the academy? The academy is very protective of its own people and has many connections. There is no benefit in offending them. I'm doing this for your own good. Little Seven tugged at Li Mu's sleeves and whispered, brother-in-law, forget it. Li Mu didn't want to let it go, but seeing that little seven was about to cry, he could only bring them back first. The director of the Ministry of Justice stood at the entrance of the yamen and waved at Li Mu. "Constable Li, take care." After sending the god of plagues away, he walked back to the yamen and heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice standing in the courtyard, he bowed slightly and said, "Assistant Minister Zhou." Zhou Zhong asked, "How was it?" The director of the Ministry of Justice let out a long sigh and said, "I understand now. Arrestor Li is a person who can be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. If you were to be tough with him, he would be tougher than you. Moreover, he is not afraid of anyone. Fortunately, he is not in the Ministry of Justice. Otherwise, the Ministry of Justice would be in chaos because of him." Zhou Zhong said, "I'm asking you, what do you think of Li Mu as a person?" The director of the Ministry of Justice thought for a while and said, "I used to think that he was arrogant and annoying. Now, I think he is actually quite amazing. The things that he does are things that others don't dare to do." Zhou Zhong smiled and walked into the yamen with his hands behind his back. The director of the Ministry of Justice followed behind him and said, "The case of the Great Music Workshop is just a small case. However, something big happened in Danyang County. The county magistrate of Ani County under Danyang County suddenly died in his home. After the investigation, the Danyang County government found out that he was assassinated." "Assassinated?" Zhou Zhong raised his eyebrows and asked, "What about the county magistrate of Ani?" The director of the Ministry of Justice shook his head and said, "I don't know. Sir, you suspect that he is a heartless official who oppresses the people. This caused the righteous people to be dissatisfied and thus caused the death of his life?" Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "It's hard to say whether it's true or not. First, send someone to the Ministry of Personnel to get the resume of the county magistrate of Ani." On the streets of Luoyang, Xiaoqi lowered his head and pinched the corner of his clothes. He whispered, "Brother-in-law, you won't blame me, right?" Li Mu sighed and said, "I know that you are doing this for my own good. However, this will only encourage the unhealthy trend in Luoyang." Yin advised Li Mu, "Brother-in-law, you have just arrived in Luoyang not long ago. You don't know how important the academy is in Luoyang and the Great Zhou. For generations, all the officials in the imperial court came from the academy. The people also respect and trust the academy. If you offend the academy, they can easily ruin your future." Xiaoqi and Yin were all thinking for him. Li Mu could not reprimand them. After sending them back to the Great Music Bar, he returned to the government office with Xiaobai. In the Great Music Lane, the middle-aged woman pointed at their heads and scolded angrily, "How powerful do you think my background is? Is the Ministry of Justice a place where you can mess around? Every single one of you has no conscience. Will you only stop after I close my shop and send me to prison?" She slapped their butts and said, "I am still counting on you to make money. Go back to your rooms. In the future, play a solo in the accord room. Don't close the door." When Li Mu returned to the government office, he saw Zhang Chun pacing back and forth in the yard. Seeing Li Mu return, Zhang Chun asked, "Do you have any more pears?" Li Mu asked, "Sir, don't you think the gong pears are sour?" Zhang Chun said, "This official likes to eat sour food." Li Mu placed the gong pears in the flask heaven ring. He flipped his hand and a pear appeared in his palm. He handed it to Zhang Chun. Zhang Chun had seen Li Mu's flask heaven magic treasure on the day of Zhou Chuxing's death. Now that he saw it with his own eyes, he could not help but sigh at the difference between people. Her Majesty's grace to him was truly meticulous and meticulous, from the moment he was young to the moment he was young. He took the pear and said, "Don't be so stingy. Give me another one." Li Mu threw him another one. Zhang Chun did not eat it. He just put it in his sleeve. Li Mu asked, "Sir, did anything happen in the imperial court today?" "It's nothing serious." Zhang Chun recalled and said, "Her Majesty wanted to reduce the number of students in the academy. She was opposed by Baichuan and Qingyun Academy. The deputy dean of Baichuan Academy directly scolded Her Majesty in the imperial court. He said that Her Majesty wanted to overturn Emperor Wen's achievements and destroy the accumulation of great Zhou over the past 100 years. He reminded Her Majesty not to become a sinner. Although the Academy could not participate in politics, a few of the higher-ups in the Academy could attend the imperial court. This was a rule set during the reign of Emperor Wen. Because of their superior status and no interests involved, they could even criticize the emperor when they met a fatuous emperor. This was also the power granted to them by Emperor Wen. Li Mu asked, "What did Her Majesty say?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "Her Majesty said nothing." It seemed that Mr. Mei was right. The Empress was indeed a broad-minded and wise ruler. She could still remain silent even after being criticized like this. But even if the Empress could tolerate it, Li Mu couldn't. Since he already knew, he could not pretend that nothing had happened. He had to share the burden of the ruler. The Empress was humiliated. If he did not do something for the Empress, he would be too ashamed to eat the tribute pears she rewarded him. Li Mu thought for a moment and suddenly asked, "Sir, if someone attempted to rape a woman, how should he be punished?" Zhang Chun asked, "Was he stopped midway or stopped by himself?" Li Mu said, "The woman resisted and attracted others to stop him." Zhang Chun said, "The punishment for attempted rape is 100 beatings. Generally, the punishment is more than 3 years and less than 10 years in prison. In serious cases, the punishment is death by beheading." Li Mu said, "There was an attempted rape case in Chengdu just now." Zhang Chun asked, "Did you catch him?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhang Chun glared at him and said, "Then what are you waiting for? Go and catch him." Li Mu held a fist and palm salute and said, "Yes, sir." "Wait." He was about to leave when Zhang Chun suddenly stopped him. He looked at Li Mu suspiciously and asked, "Is the person you're talking about a disciple of the Zhou family?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhang Chun touched his chin and said, "Then it's the Shao royal family." Li Mu shook his head again and said, "No." "Is he an influential person in Chengdu?" "No." "Is he a disciple of an official of the 4th rank or above?" "No." Zhang Chun finally breathed a sigh of relief and said, "What are you waiting for? Go and catch him. I hate criminals who rape women the most. The imperial court should really change the law and execute all these people once and for all." After a moment, Wang Wu and Li Mu came out of the government office and asked, "Boss, where are we going to catch him?" Li Mu said, "100 Rivers Academy." Wang Wu was stunned and asked, "Where?" Li Mu looked at him and asked, "You've lived in Chengdu for more than 20 years. Do you know where 100 Rivers Academy is?" Wang Wu immediately explained, "Of course I know where 100 Rivers Academy is. But boss, the academy doesn't allow outsiders to enter. We can't even enter the academy's gate, let alone catch him." Li Mu frowned. The academy was not the Ministry of Justice. There were countless experts there. Breaking into the academy was not much easier than breaking into the ancestral court of Fulu School. Li Mu was not arrogant enough to break into the academy. He thought for a moment and turned to walk into the government office. Wang Wu breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that even the fearless boss knew that the academy was not to be trifled with soon. He saw Li Mu come out of the government office again, but he had changed his official uniform into a regular one. Wang Wu scratched his head and asked, "Boss, we haven't opened the government office yet. What are you?" After a moment, at the gate of 100 Rivers Academy, Li Mu had just approached the gate when an old man suddenly appeared in front of him. The old man reached out to stop him and asked, "Who are you? What are you doing at the academy?" The academy was indeed an academy. Even the guards at the gate were in the divine power realm. Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm Jiangzhe's relative. I have something important to tell him." The old man said expressionlessly, "Those who are not students of the academy are not allowed to enter. If you have something to say, I'll pass it on for you." Li Mu shook his head and said, "This is very important. I have to tell him personally. I don't have to enter the academy. I just have to ask Jiangzhe to come out." Chapter 240. After the old man entered the academy, Li Mu waited outside the academy. The 100 Rivers Academy was located in the southern district of the divine capital, covered a large area. The road in front of the academy could accommodate 4 carriages at the same time. There was a stone tablet in front of the academy. It was engraved with the words, 100 Rivers to the Sea. It was said that it was written by Emperor Wen himself. Standing in front of the academy's gate, a magnificent aura hit him in the face. Li Mu wouldn't have such a feeling just by looking at a door. There must be a formation covering the academy. Li Mu waited outside for a quarter of an hour. During this time, students came in and out from time to time. Li Mu noticed that when they entered the academy and walked through the gate, there was an obscure fluctuation of spirit energy on them. Obviously, the gate of the academy was a powerful formation. The students of the academy should have something to verify their identity. If outsiders came close, they would be blocked outside by the formation. Li Mu waited for a while more. The old man he saw just now finally came out with a young student. Zhangzhe looked around but did not see a familiar face. He turned around and asked, "You said that my relative is here. Where is he?" The old man pointed at Li Mu and said, "This person said that he is your relative and has something important to tell you. Why, you don't know him?" "No." Zhangzhe walked in front of Li Mu and asked, "Who are you and why are you looking for me?" Li Mu said, "Your family asked me to bring you something." Zhangzhe was puzzled. "What is it?" Li Mu stretched out his hand. A light flashed and a chain appeared in his hand. There was a collar at the front of the chain. Zhangzhe was still staring blankly at the thing in Li Mu's hand when the collar suddenly opened. It wrapped around his neck and closed again. The shackles of the yamen were partly prepared for ordinary people and partly for demonic ghost cultivators. Although this chain was not a powerful magic weapon, it had no problem locking down low-level demonic ghosts and cultivators of the lower 3 realms. When they were locked by the chain, they could not use their magic power. Zhangzhe's cultivation was only in the soul condensation realm. By the time he reacted, Li Mu had already put the iron chain around his neck. The old man with the divine arts reacted much faster. He noticed that something was wrong and instantly appeared here. He glared at Li Mu and said furiously, "Junior, what are you doing?" Li Mu took out the token on his waist and waved it in front of the old man, saying, "100 Rivers Academy's Li Mu failed to rape an innocent girl. Shin Du Yamen arrestor Li Mu, ordered to arrest the criminal." The old man said with a gloomy face, "He's a student of the academy. Let him go immediately." Li Mu snorted and said, "Luoyang is the great Zhou's capital, not the academy's. If anyone breaks the law, the governor's office has the right to punish them." The old man glared at Li Mu and did not say anything more. He reached out to grab the chain in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu grabbed the chain with one hand and grabbed the air with the other. A fulu appeared in his hand. He looked at the old man and said coldly, "Using violence to threaten a public servant and obstructing official business. Even if I kill you in front of the academy today, I won't have to take responsibility." The old man stopped in his tracks and looked at the fulu in Li Mu's hand. He was afraid and did not dare to step forward. There were teachers in the academy who were proficient in the fulu. He knew what the purple cloud thunder charm looked like. The charm's power was not ordinary. If he was hit by it, even if he did not die, he would lose half his life. Seeing the old man retreat, Li Mu dragged Zhangzhe with the iron chain and swaggered towards the yamen. Zhangzhe was dragged by Li Mu. His face was full of panic and he shouted, "Save me!" The old man gritted his teeth and went back into the academy. In a classroom in the academy, the gray-haired old man stopped teaching and frowned. "What? You said Zhangzhe was taken away by the Luoyang Yamen?" The old man said. He said Zhangzhe was related to a case and wanted to bring him back to the Yamen for investigation. The gray-haired old man threw down the book and said angrily, "How dare they? Since when did they have the right to interfere in the academy's matters?" He waved his sleeves and said in a deep voice, "Follow me to the Luoyang Yamen." The Baichuan Academy was not far from the Yamen. Li Mu dragged Zhangzhe on the street and attracted many people's attention. Many people greeted Li Mu every day and were already familiar with him. They approached him and asked, "Constable Li, what crime did this man commit?" Li Mu said, "Attempted rape of a woman. You have to take this as a warning and obey the law." That person quickly said, "We won't do such a thing even if we're beaten to death. This guy is dressed like a dog, but I didn't expect him to be a beast." Another person said, "Look at his clothes. He's definitely not from an ordinary family. I wonder which family he's from in Luoyang." He accidentally fell into Constable Li's hands again. There seemed to be 3 vertical blue ripples on the chest of his clothes. 3 blue ripples? Isn't that the symbol of the Baichuan Academy? Is he a student of the Baichuan Academy? Yes, he's a student of the Baichuan Academy. He's wearing the academy uniform. Li Mu dragged Jiangzhe away. The people were still talking behind them. The academy had a high status in the hearts of the people. It was a place that nurtured talents for the country. For more than 100 years, the academy students had contributed a lot to the great show. How can a student of the Baichuan Academy be a rapist? Do you think Constable Li caught the wrong person? The person caught by Constable Li can't be wrong. He provoked the old faction and killed Director Zhou. It's only been a few days. Why is Constable Li at odds with the academy again? What's wrong with the academy? If someone from the academy breaks the law, he has to be punished by the law. I'm worried that the academy will cover for him. The academy is a place that educates and cultivates talents for the country. How can it cover for a rapist? Your worries are unnecessary. How can there be such an academy? Li Mu brought Jiangzhe back to the government office. Zhang Chun had been waiting in the court for a long time. When he saw Jiangzhe, he was stunned and asked, "This is the rapist?" Li Mu nodded and said, "That's him." Zhang Chun's face darkened. He said, "He's well-dressed. I didn't expect him to be a beast." After snorting coldly, a trace of doubt appeared on his face. He muttered, "Why do I find his clothes familiar? I think I've seen them somewhere before." Wang Wu reminded him, "This is the uniform of the Baichuan Academy." Zhang Chun suddenly understood and said, "I remember. When I was still in the Scroll Academy, the students of the Baichuan Academy wore this kind of clothes during the competition of the 4 academies. It turns out that he's from the Baichuan Academy, the Baichuan Academy." Zhang Chun stared at Li Mu with wide eyes and said angrily, "He's from the Baichuan Academy. Why didn't you tell me?" Li Mu said innocently, "Your Excellency didn't ask." Zhang Chun was speechless for a moment. He asked the dignitaries, the old party, and the new party, but he didn't mention the academy. It was not that he didn't think of it, but he thought that even if Li Mu was bold, he should know the status of the academy in the hearts of the officials and the people. Even His Majesty had to respect the academy. Who did he think he was? Could he ride on His Majesty's back? Li Mu said, "Your Excellency Zhang once said that everyone is equal in front of the law. Anyone who commits a crime must be punished by the law. Your Excellency has always been my role model. Do you think that the students of the academy are above the people and can get away with it if they commit a crime?" Zhang Chun's old face turned red. He coughed softly and said, "Of course I didn't mean that. But you should at least tell me in advance so that I can be mentally prepared." Li Mu said, "I thought that in your eyes, there are only law-abiding and law-breaking people. There is no distinction between the common people and the students of the academy." Zhang Chun sighed, "But," Li Mu asked, "Don't you think so, Your Excellency?" Zhang Chun's expression turned serious. He said, "Of course I think so. Everyone is equal in front of the law. Even the students of the academy must be punished if they are punished." As soon as he finished speaking, several figures walked in from outside. The leader was a gray-haired old man. Behind him were several students who were also wearing the uniform of the 100 Rivers Academy. Jiangzhe looked at the old man with hope on his face. He shouted, "Sir, save me." Zhang Chun walked up to the old man and cupped his fists. He said, "I'm Zhang Chun of the Divine Capital. May I know who you are?" The old man in luxurious clothes said lightly, "My surname is Fong. I'm an instructor of the 100 Rivers Academy. Zhang Chun said. So it's Sir Fong. I've heard so much about you. The old man in luxurious clothes went straight to the point. May I know what crime my student has committed for you to detain him in the yamen, Sir Zhang? Zhang Chun said. This person attempted to rape a woman. Although he failed, he must be punished by the law. The old man in luxurious clothes said. Zhang Zhe is a student of the academy. The academy will punish him for his mistake. There's no need for the yamen to do it. Zhang Chun shook his head. He didn't make a mistake. He broke the law. The old man in luxurious clothes asked, May I ask if he ever succeeded in raping a woman? Zhang Chun shook his head. No. The old man in luxurious clothes said, If that's the case, how can you say he broke the law? Zhang Chun didn't explain this time, so the old man thought that he had nothing to say. He grabbed the iron chain around Zhang Zhe's neck and pulled with force. The iron chain was torn apart by him. He glanced at Zhang Zhe and said coldly, You disgraceful thing. Scram back to the academy immediately and accept your punishment. Zhang Zhe shuddered and quickly stood in the midst of the students. The old man glanced at Zhang Chun and said, Sorry to disturb you. With that said, he led the group away from the yamen. From beginning to end, Li Mu did not stop them. With his understanding of Zhang Chun, it was hard to say if Zhang Zhe had not entered the yamen. Once he entered, it would not be easy for him to leave. Even if he left now, he would have to return sooner or later. This is too much. As soon as the old man left, Zhang Chun pointed at the door and shouted, How dare they barge into the yamen and kidnap a criminal in broad daylight? Do they have no respect for the law? Does His Majesty even exist? I'll write a memorial to His Majesty. Chapter 241. The longer Li Mu knew Zhang Chun, the more he realized that Zhang Chun had many tricks up his sleeve despite his thick eyebrows and big eyes. If he insisted on not letting Zhang Zhe go, the academy's instructor would not dare to snatch Zhang Zhe from the yamen. The academy's status was superior, but it did not mean that its students were above the law. The instructor would only dare to take Zhang Zhe away if he pretended to be afraid of the academy. When he took Zhang Zhe away, he gave the yamen enough reason to do so. But by doing so, he would offend the Baichuan Academy. Li Mu reminded him, Sir, aren't you afraid of the academy? Zhang Chun spat and said, What's there to be afraid of? This is the government office. If I let him take him away so easily, I will lose face. Where will the law and His Majesty's face be? Li Mu felt that Zhang Chun was going to throw caution to the wind. Lord Zhang, who used to be as timid as a mouse, had now become as hot-headed as Li Mu. What had he experienced? Outside the Luoyang Yamen, the people who were attracted saw the people from the academy barge into the yamen and walk out after a while. Zhang Zhe, who was handcuffed by Li Mu, was also in the crowd and could not help but be shocked. He's out just like that? Raping a woman is such a serious crime. He's out just like that? What else can he do? You know what kind of place the academy is and how many connections they have in the imperial court. Not to mention rape, even murder and arson. As long as the academy protects them, nothing will happen. The people could not understand what they saw with their own eyes. The academy had a high status in the hearts of the people. For 100 years, the academy had been sending talents to the imperial court. Most of the 36 counties in the Great Zhou, including the Luoyang, were governed by the academy's students. The academy had contributed greatly. The 4 major academies in the Luoyang were respected by the people, be it the instructors or the students. They only saw the academy's glory, but rarely saw this side of the academy. The Baichuan Academy. The old man in fine clothes who had returned to the academy looked at Zhang Zhe and snorted. He said angrily, Bastard! Zhang Zhe hurriedly knelt down and said, Teacher, this student was wrong. This student will never dare to do it again. The old man said, This old man has saved you this time. If there's a next time, you'll have to fend for yourself. Zhang Zhe repeatedly promised, I won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. The old man coldly looked at him and said, If you were a bit more diligent in your cultivation, you wouldn't have been so easily taken down by a Jushin officer. Don't go out to drink and have fun. Spend your time on cultivation. If you still can't reach the Jushin level in a year, then get the hell out of the academy." After the old man finished speaking, he flicked his sleeves and left. Jiangzhe heaved a sigh of relief and whispered, "That was close?" A student beside him smiled at him and said, "Didn't you do this kind of thing smoothly before? How come you almost fell into the gutter this time?" Jiangzhe said hatefully, "It was fine this time. I even went to the Ministry of Justice and still came back. It's all that damned constable's fault. He almost ruined my future. This debt, I'll settle it sooner or later," the student said. "It's just a constable. When you leave the academy next year and get a good position in the divine capital, there will be plenty of ways to kill him." Crepe Myrtle Hall. There wasn't anything important to discuss in today's morning court. After the 6 assistant ministers reported their work, the young female official walked out from behind the curtain and said, "If there is nothing else, then today's morning court will end here." The officials put away their tablets and were about to leave when a voice suddenly came from the back of the hall. "Your Majesty, this official has a memorial." Everyone couldn't help but look at the back. During the morning court, the officials stood according to their ranks. Those standing at the back were usually the lowest-ranking officials. When they came to the court, they were just going through the motions. Very few of them would take the initiative to speak. At the end of everyone's line of sight, at the entrance of Crepe Myrtle Hall, an official in the second-last row stood up. It was the first time for most of the officials in the hall to see him. The official took a few steps forward and came to the center of the hall. He bowed and said, "I'm Zhang Chun of the Divine Capital. I have something important to report." When he reported his official position, many people in the hall realized that he was Zhang Chun. The abolition of the silver in lieu of crime was due to the letter he had sent. The children of several officials in the hall had all suffered under his hands. He had only been in the divine capital for a few months, but he had been promoted twice. He even had the right to discuss matters in the court. He had stepped on these officials. The young female official stood at the top and said calmly, "Report." Zhang Chun raised his head and said, "Instructor Fong of the Baichuan Academy forced his way into the Yamen 3 days ago and took away a criminal from the divine capital Yamen. This case involves the academy, so I dare not make a judgment. Your Majesty, please make a decision." As soon as he finished speaking, there was an uproar in the court. No one had expected that Zhang Chun would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. He had just proposed to abolish the substitute silver last time, and now he was accusing the academy. No wonder Li Mu of the divine capital Yamen was so arrogant. He had a superior who was even more arrogant than him. It had been so many years since someone accused the academy in the court. This was the first time. Nonsense. As soon as Zhang Chun finished speaking, an old man wearing a crown stepped forward and said coldly, "I'm an instructor of the Baichuan Academy. How could I do such a thing?" Behind the curtain, a dignified voice said, "Vice President Chun, why do you have to jump to conclusions so early? Whether it's true or not, won't it be clear when Instructor Fong confronts the divine capital Yamen?" Vice President Chun said in a low voice, "I'll go back to the academy and bring Instructor Fong to the palace to confront him." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and disappeared. Zhang Chun immediately said, "Your Majesty, please summon Arrestor Li Mu of the divine capital Yamen to the palace. He's in charge of this case. He's more familiar with it than I am. He was there when Instructor Fong brought people into the Yamen yesterday. He can testify for me." After a moment of silence, the person behind the curtain said, "Mei Wei, bring Li Mu to the palace." As soon as Mei Wei left, Vice President Chen's figure appeared again. At this time, there was another person beside him. It was the old man in the luxurious robe. The old man bowed to the Empress first. "Your Majesty," the young female official said, "Instructor Fong, the divine capital Yamen said that you brought people into the divine capital Yamen 3 days ago and took away a prisoner. Is this true?" The old man in the luxurious robe glanced at Zhang Chun. and his expression changed slightly. He immediately said, "I did take away a student from the Divine Capital Yamen, but that student didn't break the law. The Divine Capital Yamen ordered people to trick my student out of the academy and forcibly detain him in the Yamen. I heard that I went to the Yamen to rescue him. How can you say that I forced my way in?" Zhang Chun sneered and said, "Your student raped a woman. I ordered Arrestor Li to go to the academy to arrest him, but he was stopped by the academy. He had no choice but to use a trick to lure the criminal out. Later, you forced your way into the Yamen and took him back to the academy. Is there any falsehood in my words?" The old man in the luxurious robe said angrily, "My student was just impulsive after drinking. His behavior was a little out of line. The Divine Capital Yamen shouldn't slander me." Zhang Chun asked, "Instructor Fong, do you mean that I can only convict your student if he succeeded in his rape?" The old man in the luxurious robe did not answer directly. He said, "The students of the academy represent the honor of the academy and the future of the imperial court. If you arbitrarily convict them, where will the academy's face go?" Zhang Chun said coldly, "Is the face of the academy more important, or the dignity of the great Zhou's law more important?" The old man in the luxurious robe tried to slander him, but Zhang Chun slandered him with an even bigger accusation. The two of them were at each other's throats in the palace. At this time, footsteps came from outside the palace again. Li Mu, accompanied by Mr. Mei, walked into the palace. This was the first time he came to the place where all the officials were gathered. His gaze swept across everyone's faces, and then he looked up impatiently. Li Mu had been friends with the Empress for a long time, but he had never seen her before. He did not know if she was tall or short, fat or thin, beautiful or ugly. Suddenly being summoned, Li Mu thought that he would be able to see her face. However, he did not expect that there was a curtain between the Empress and the officials. Li Mu stood there and could not see anything. It was not until Mr. Mei poked him that Li Mu came to his senses. He bowed and said, "Divine Capital Yamen Constable Li Mu pays his respects to Her Majesty. No need for formalities." A dignified voice came from behind the curtain. "Tell me the cause and effect of this case in detail." This dignified voice sounded very familiar to Li Mu, as if he had heard it somewhere before. He thought carefully but could not remember where he had heard it before. It was not until Mr. Mei poked him again that Li Mu came to his senses. He looked up and said, 3 days ago, Jiang Zhe, a student of the Baichuan Academy, was listening to music at the Great Music Lane. He was lustful toward a musician and wanted to rape her. The musician called for help and attracted other musicians, so Jiang Zhe did not succeed. After learning about this case, I was ordered by Lord Jiang to go to the academy to arrest Jiang Zhe. Because I could not enter the academy, I could only use a trick to lure Jiang Zhe out and detain him in the capital Yamen. I did not expect that before the Yamen could detain him, he would be taken away by Instructor Fong. The old man in luxurious clothes said angrily, "What do you mean by taken away? When I took Jiang Zhe away, you did not stop me at all." Li Mu said, "You are a strong man in the creation realm, and you have helpers. All the constables in the capital Yamen and Lord Jiang were no match for you. How could we dare to stop you? We could only watch you take the criminal away." The chest of the old man in luxurious clothes rose and fell. He said, "Didn't you say that if you did not succeed in raping a woman, it was not a crime?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "That was what you said. I did not say that." The old man in luxurious clothes said angrily, "Why didn't you say that at that time?" Zhang Chun shrugged and said, "I told you that he had violated the law, but you did not believe me. You even destroyed the instruments of torture in the Yamen and insisted on taking him away. I was afraid that if I angered you, you would attack me." The old man in luxurious clothes opened his mouth but did not know what to say. He had been in the academy for decades and had never met such a person. This black-hearted official had clearly dug a hole for him to jump into. Chapter 242. Instructor Fong was rendered speechless by Zhang Chun's words. The vice-headmaster of the 100 Rivers Academy could no longer sit by and watch. He said, "I believe that the students of our academy would not do such a thing. Your Majesty, please investigate thoroughly and clear the name of our academy." After a short period of silence, the Empress's voice came from behind the curtain. "Since Vice-Headmaster Chun has said so, the case will be investigated by the Luoyang government." Vice-Headmaster Chun raised his head and said, "Your Majesty, the Luoyang government is suspected of framing the academy. The case should not be handled by the Luoyang government." The Empress thought for a while and said, "Then let the Ministry of Justice investigate." The Minister of Justice stepped out and bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." This was all Li Mu and Zhang Chun could do. Although they had set a trap for Instructor Fong, they could find out whether he had really made a scene in the Luoyang government and snatched Instructor Fong away with a little investigation. It was already the best result that the Ministry of Justice could do a retrial. Li Mu had never thought of bringing down the academy, and it was impossible for him to do so. Overall, the academy's existence had more advantages than disadvantages. Firstly, he wanted to seek justice for Shao Qi, and secondly, he wanted to vent the Empress's anger. Although the academy was a place to educate people and cultivate talents for the country, it should not be above the law. They should not be on the altar in the human world. Jiang's case was originally a small case that would not affect the academy. However, Instructor Fong had taken Jiang away from the Luoyang government in public, which had caused a public outcry. It added a stain to the holy and glorious image of the academy. The young female official stepped out and said, "The court is dismissed." There was an etiquette for the withdrawal of the court. The officials respectfully sent the Empress off. The ones closest to the door, the ones with the lowest rank, had to take 2 steps back and wait for the officials in front to leave first. Li Mu and Zhang Chun stood at the door. Countless eyes swept over them. After everyone had left, the two of them slowly walked out of the hall. Li Mu felt a little regretful. It was not easy to enter the palace, but he did not see the Empress's face. There would be no chance next time. In the imperial garden behind the Ziwei Palace, the young female official said, "This magistrate of Luoyang is quite brave. I can't stand the arrogance of those from the academy in the imperial court." Mr. Mei also said, "Luoyang's Zhang Chun is neither servile nor overbearing. He's a useful person. We should reward him more as an incentive." The young female official frowned and said, "But the speed of his promotion is already very fast. It has never happened in recent years. It is impossible to promote him again." The Empress thought for a moment, then said, "Give him a chest of pears." Mr. Mei nodded and said, "That's good. There's a box of pears left." The Empress was silent for a moment. Then, she asked, "There is only 1 box of tribute pears left?" Mr. Mei said, "In Jiangyin County, there are only a few mother trees. They were carefully cultivated by the local government. Every year, there are no more than 10 boxes of tribute pears. After they are sent to the palace, they have to give some to the West Palace. There aren't many left." The Empress thought for a moment, then said, "Then give me half a box. No, give me 3. Luoyang government." Zhang Chun looked at the 3 boxes of tribute pears sent from the palace. He bowed excitedly and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Mr. Mei said, "I hope that Mr. Zhang will continue to do his job diligently and honestly. Don't let Your Majesty down." Zhang Chun said solemnly, "I will remember." After sending off Mr. Mei, Zhang Chun picked up a tribute pear and took a bite. He said proudly, "This pear is so sweet." After leaving the palace, Li Mu went straight to the great music bar. The Ministry of Justice would definitely ask Shao Qi and the others to investigate the case. He needed to tell them in advance so that they would not panic. When Little Seven heard this, she was clearly worried. She was only a lowly musician and had never experienced such a situation. Li Mu looked at her and comforted her. "Don't worry. I will go to the Ministry of Justice with you. You are the victim. They should be the ones worried." When Little Seven heard this, she finally relaxed. At the same time, in the Ministry of Justice, Vice President Chan said to the Minister of the Ministry of Justice, This matter concerns the reputation of the academy. I will leave it to you. The minister of the Ministry of Justice hesitated for a moment and looked up at him. He said, "The behavior of the academy's students has nothing to do with the academy. If it is handled impartially, the academy will not be implicated. If the Ministry of Justice is biased, it will be disadvantageous to the academy." Vice President Chen, you must think carefully. Vice President Chen frowned. He had just declared that Jiangzhe was innocent in the court. If the Ministry of Justice overturned it, wouldn't he become a joke? At this moment, the Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong, said, "The Ministry of Justice has the power to decide the case." The girl was not harmed. As long as Jiangzhe insists that he was rude after drinking and repents, he will be exempted from punishment. Vice President Chen thought for a moment and said, "I still don't believe that the academy students would do such a bad thing." The Minister of the Ministry of Justice understood what he meant. He meant that the Ministry of Justice would help the academy regardless of whether Jiangzhe was guilty or not. He already knew the inside story of this case. Jiangzhe knelt on the ground and said, "Sir, please understand. I was impulsive after drinking and was rude to this lady. Later, I remembered the teacher's teachings and suddenly came to my senses. I didn't continue to violate this lady?" Yin said angrily. "You only stopped when we rushed to the room," Jiangzhe said. "At that time, I wanted to apologize to this lady. You misunderstood. You are clearly quibbling. That is the truth." Jiangzhe looked up at the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice and clasped his hands. "Sir, please understand. Both sides had their own version of the story. Jiangzhe said that he stopped the violence voluntarily, but the musician of the great music bar said that he was stopped by others. Although the results of these two cases were the same, the meaning was completely different. The Ministry of Justice's punishment for this case was based on the process of the case." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice said lightly, "I will use the soul manipulation on Jiangzhe. The truth will be revealed soon." He looked at Jiangzhe and said, "Raise your head." Jiangzhe raised his head and looked into the eyes of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice's eyes became deep pools. He asked, "Jiangzhe, let me ask you, when you wanted to violate this lady, did you repent on your own? Or was it because someone stopped you?" Jiangzhe's eyes were dull. He murmured, "I repented on my own and realized that I had made a mistake. I wanted to explain to this lady, but perhaps I was too anxious and was misunderstood by her." Li Mu's expression was ugly. Shao Qi and the others could not be lying. Either Jiangzhe had a way to avoid the soul manipulation, or the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice deliberately let him go. Regardless of which possibility it was not something that ordinary people could see through. Jiangzhe's actions before he was stopped were attributed to him being too anxious to explain. Even if a transcendent expert could reenact the scene, they could not convict him. It was obvious that he had made sufficient preparations before going to court. Even if the Ministry of Justice's punishment was presented to the Empress, it would not be a problem. The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice looked at everyone and said, "The truth is out. Although Jiangzhe was in the wrong, he did not deserve to be punished. Seeing that you were able to repent in time, I acquit you. However, you have disturbed this lady, so you must apologize to her and compensate her with 10 taels of silver. Do you have any objections?" Jiangzhe immediately said, "Thank you, sir, for proving my innocence." He stood up and bowed to Shao Qi. He said, "I was rude after drinking and offended you. I apologize to the lady." The Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice slammed the gavel and said, "The case has been investigated. The court is dismissed." Jiangzhe left 10 taels of silver and looked at Li Mu and the others. He smiled and strode out of the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu sent Shao Qi and the others out of the Ministry of Justice. He looked back and walked back. He looked at a figure standing in the courtyard and said slowly, "Sir Zhou, you should know better than anyone whether Jiangzhe is guilty or not, right?" Zhou Zhong looked at him and asked, Is this important? Li Mu said in a low voice. If right or wrong, justice and justice are not important. What else is important in this world? Zhou Zhong looked into his eyes and said after a long time, You are really like a friend that I haven't seen for many years. Li Mu said coldly. You don't deserve such a friend. Zhou Zhong was not angry. Instead, he smiled and said, Young man, when you first came to Luoyang, you thought that you were the embodiment of justice and did not care about anyone. They fought with the rich and powerful, corrupt officials and the academy. There were many people like you in the past, but now you are the only one. Do you know why? He said to himself. Some people are dead, some are still alive. If the living want to live a better life, they have to become the people they used to hate the most. You will also have such a day. Li Mu said, You can wait and see. Zhou Zhong said, I will wait and see. Li Mu turned around and left in big strides. Zhou Zhong looked at his back and a mysterious smile appeared on his face. Chapter 243. Ministry of Justice. Zhou Zhong returned to the office and tapped the table with his knuckles. No one knew what he was thinking. The director of the Ministry of Justice knocked on the door and walked in. He put a file on the table in front of him and said, Assistant Minister, I went to the Ministry of Appointments and asked them to make a copy of County Magistrate and Yi's resume. It's here. Zhou Zhong looked forward and his mind seemed to be elsewhere. He asked, Is there a problem? The director of the Ministry of Justice said, This person's resume is an A in every 3 years. However, everyone knows what the Ministry of Appointments resume is about. It's too hard to use it to wipe someone's ass. There's no reference value. Even the county magistrate of Yangyang County can get an A in every year. This county magistrate and E was originally from the Ministry of Appointments. It's normal for the Ministry of Appointments to protect him. If you want to know how an E county is governed, you have to send someone to an E county to see for yourself. Ministry of Appointments? The director of the Ministry of Justice's words seemed to have touched Zhou Zhong. He opened the resume of County Magistrate and E and glanced at it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he put down the resume and said, I'll send someone to handle this case. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Danyang County was far away and it was very troublesome to investigate an E county. The director of the Ministry of Justice didn't want to take care of this troublesome task. He was delighted and said, If that's the case, I'll take my leave first. He strode out of the office. Zhou Zhong looked at the resume of County Magistrate and E for a long time. This resume from the Ministry of Appointments and a case file about the assassination of County Magistrate and E slowly floated up from the table. Puff! A ball of fire suddenly appeared in the air. The resume and the case file were quickly swallowed by the fire. In an instant, they disappeared without a trace. Not even ashes were left. Li Mu walked out of the Ministry of Justice. He was still angry. With his character, he wouldn't have said so much to the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. However, Zhou Zhong used to be a clear stream in Luoyang more than 10 years ago. The law reform he proposed was very advanced even now. Evil people would do evil. This was a fact that had never changed since ancient times. It was a pity and anger that a hero who slayed a dragon became an evil dragon. Li Mu was not Zhou Zhong, so he did not know why Jiangxia had changed like this. However, the way the Ministry of Justice dealt with Jiangxia was not entirely a bad thing. If the Ministry of Justice dealt with Jiangxia fairly, the Hundred Rivers Academy would inevitably lose some face. After all, it was shameful for a student of the academy to have such a scandal. This loss of face was negligible. Perhaps it would not be mentioned again in a few days. However, after Jiangxia committed the crime, he was still able to get away with it under the protection of the academy. This matter would stir up even more public opinion among the people. It was inevitable that the people would look at the Hundred Rivers Academy through colored glasses in the future. It had to be said that some people in the academy were used to being high and mighty. That was why they made such a stupid decision. Zhou Zhong wasn't helping the Hundred Rivers Academy. He had solved a small problem for the Hundred Rivers Academy, but he had also planted a big problem for them. Once the reputation of the academy collapsed, it would not be so easy to rebuild it. If Her Majesty could seize the opportunity, she might be able to change part of the situation in the imperial court. Li Mu felt that he was really worried about Her Majesty. As a lowly official with only a few taels of silver a month, he was worried about the Prime Minister. Outside the Ministry of Justice, the onlookers had not dispersed. A man came forward and asked, "Constable Li, why did Jiangzhe swagger out of the Ministry of Justice? Is he really not guilty?" Li Mu did not speak. He only sighed and said, "The Ministry of Justice has already declared Jiangzhe not guilty. Let's disperse." "How could this be? Constable Li, is there any inside story? Isn't it obvious?" "Don't make things difficult for Constable Li. He has his own difficulties. Who dares to provoke the academy? Constable Li might even lose his position. Constable Li has done so much for us. We have to think for him." The people were very dissatisfied with Jiangzhe's ending. If there was no outside intervention, this dissatisfaction would reach its peak in a short period of time and then slowly fade away. Humans were forgetful. After a few days, if something new happened in Luoyang, these old things would be replaced and forgotten. Li Mu was still brooding over Zhou Zhong's matter. When he returned to the Yamen, he flipped open the law of Zhou and found the laws that Zhou Zhong had advocated. The more he read, the angrier he became. He had advocated the abolition of the silver law of substitution more than 10 years ago. Since the establishment of the Great Zhou, it had pursued the rule of etiquette. Under this rule, the aristocrats and officials enjoyed great privileges. Later, some emperors began to accept the idea of the rule of law, which led to the current situation of rule of etiquette and law. The silver law of substitution was actually to legalize the privileges of the privileged class. Zhou Zhong was resolutely opposed to this practice, thinking that it was an insult to the legal system. The law did not distinguish between relatives and estrangement, high and low. The monarch and his ministers, from top to bottom, high and low, all followed the law. Punishing the wrong did not evade the ministers, rewarding the good did not spare the common man. He wanted to implement a thorough rule of law. In addition, he also pointed out the shortcomings of the academy and suggested that the imperial court should select talents from outside the academy. This could effectively prevent the officials from forming cliques and the academy from interfering in politics. Later, he failed. His failure was not surprising. It was because he challenged the officials, the nobles, and the academy. Because of this matter, he was demoted and almost exiled. Seeing this, Li Mu's anger and resentment subsided a little. He could not describe what he was feeling in his heart. Those who held the firewood for the people froze to death in the wind and snow. Those who opened the way for justice died in the thorns. This was the true portrayal of Zhou Zhong. Li Mu did not know what happened later, but it was not difficult to guess based on his current status and power. Zhang Chun strolled in from outside and looked at Li Mu with a proud expression. He asked, "Did His Majesty reward you with anything?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." Zhang Chun smiled and then said regretfully, "His Majesty rewarded me with 3 tribute pears. They were much sweeter than the ones I ate from you. Unfortunately, there were only 3. Otherwise, I would have given you 1 and let you have a taste." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I still have half a box at home. Sir, you can keep it for yourself." Feeling a familiar breath, Li Mu walked outside and saw Mr. Mei walking in from outside the Yamen. The 2 people behind her moved a big box into the yard of the Yamen. Mr. Mei said to Li Mu, "These spiritual jades are from His Majesty." Li Mu quickly walked forward and opened the box. Seeing that it was full of high-quality spiritual jades, he immediately put them into the flask space. After using up all the spiritual jades he got from the county Yamen, he was worried about new ones. He did not expect His Majesty to be so considerate and send them to him so quickly. With these spiritual jades, he and Xiao Bai did not have to worry about cultivation resources in a short time. Zhang Chun looked at the box of spiritual jades from afar. He touched the 2 tribute pears in his sleeve and suddenly felt that the one he ate just now was not as sweet as before. Li Mu knew that he was just doing what he was supposed to do. He said embarrassedly, "I didn't do anything wrong. Why did His Majesty suddenly reward me? Mr. May said. How can you hide your thoughts from His Majesty? Are you trying to take the opportunity to make trouble for the Academy so that you can avenge His Majesty? If he did not know that the Empress was a cultivator of the seventh land who could sit in the palace and know everything in the world with a pinch of her fingers, Li Mu would have thought that she had installed a surveillance camera on him. But since they were talking about this, he could use Mr. May to tell His Majesty his thoughts. Li Mu said, It's not entirely a bad thing that the Ministry of Justice covered up for Jiangzhe. The deputy headmaster of the Baichuan Academy dared to criticize His Majesty in front of the court because of the Academy's high status and high reputation among the people and the court. If the Academy loses its reputation, His Majesty can reasonably reduce the number of students from the Academy who can become officials. If such a scandal happens, how can they refute His Majesty? The Academy's high status was because they had sent many talents to the court and the people trusted them. Once the people no longer trusted them, they would naturally lose their high status. As the ruler of the Great Zhou, the Empress had absolute power. In principle, as long as she wanted to do something, there was nothing she could not do. However, if she acted arbitrarily and did not care about the opinions of the Academy and the officials, it would not be good for maintaining the stability of the court and gathering the people's support. All she needed was a reason. If the Empress took advantage of this and made a fuss, the Academy would lose more than just trust and status. Mr. May's eyes flashed with a strange light. He said, You're right. I'll go to the palace and report to His Majesty. Before she left, Li Mu added, Remember to remind His Majesty that the impact of Jiangzhe's incident is limited. The Baichuan Academy has been in Luoyang for hundreds of years and will not lose its reputation so easily. The people will soon forget about this unless someone is fanning the flames and pushing the Baichuan Academy to the cusp of the storm. In the palace, in a hall, the space in the hall fluctuated and the figure of Mr. May appeared out of thin air. Her body began to change, gradually turning into another figure. She looked at the real Mr. May and said, You're right. He is indeed loyal to me and smart. If he were in the court, I would feel much better. Think of a way to get him to my side. He was still the arrestor of the Luoyang Yamen, but he had to appear in the palace every time he attended the court. He stood in the corner of the palace and observed secretly. Li Mu was confused and asked, Why did Her Majesty suddenly want me to be an imperial censor? Mr. May said, Because you are not afraid of the nobles or the Academy. She dares to speak out. Her Majesty needs you to speak out in the imperial court. Li Mu nodded and said, I understand. Baichuan Academy. An old man pointed at Vice President Chen and said angrily, Are you stupid? You ruined the Academy's century-old reputation in order to protect a guilty student. You have to apologize to the Academy's past sages. Vice President Chen's face also darkened. He said, This was originally a small matter. It shouldn't have escalated to this point. Someone must have added fuel to the fire. The old man said angrily, If you had done things impartially, how could you have been caught? Vice President Chen said, I want to know who set us up. This started with the Luoyang prefect Zhang Chun. I have already investigated. Zhang Chun was once a student of the Myriad Scroll Academy. Could this be a trap set by the Myriad Scroll Academy? The old man said, This is not important. For now, the most important thing is how to restore the Academy's reputation. Even the headmaster, who was in seclusion, was alerted. The headmaster has already ordered Jiang Zhe to be expelled from the Academy and Fang Bo to be stripped of his teaching qualifications. No one is allowed to plead for them in the imperial court. Vice President Chen looked regretful. He gritted his teeth and said, I understand. Ziwei Palace. 3 days ago, the imperial censor was ordered by the Empress to investigate Jiang Zhe's case. After 3 days of questioning and investigation, the imperial censor finally found the origin of the case. When Jiang Zhe was listening to music at the great music bar, he was lustful towards a beautiful musician in a private room and wanted to violate her. The musician of the great music bar could not bear the humiliation and cried for help. In the end, other musicians were alerted. They broke into the room and stopped Jiangzhe. It was not as Jiangzhe said, that he regretted it during the process of violating the musician. The Ministry of Justice misjudged the case because when Jiangzhe was being tried in the Ministry of Justice, he had a magic weapon given to him by his teacher, Fangbo. This magic weapon could keep one awake when one's soul was being controlled, thus misleading the officials of the Ministry of Justice. After Jiangzhe committed the crime, he refused to confess and misled the Ministry of Justice, causing the case to be misjudged. This caused an extremely bad influence in Luoyang. According to the law, Jiangzhe was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His cultivation was abolished and he would never be employed again. Behind the curtain, the Empress asked Vice President Chen coldly, "Does the Baichuan Academy have any objections?" Vice President Chen lowered his head and said, "Fangbo and Jiangzhe have deceived the Imperial Court and the Academy. The Baichuan Academy has already expelled Jiangzhe from the Academy and stripped Fangbo of his teaching qualifications. The Imperial Censor has passed the judgment according to the law. The Academy has no objections." The Empress said in a dignified voice, "Jiangzhe's case has caused a bad influence. The Academy cannot escape the blame. This year, the quota for students of the Baichuan Academy to become officials will be reduced by half." Vice President Chen's lips moved, but he did not speak in the end. Such a scandal had happened in the Academy. At this moment, he had no face to refute. Chapter 245. It was rare for the Academy to lower its head in court, but the Empress didn't stop there. The Empress's voice continued to come from behind the curtain. For more than 100 years, all the officials in Great Zhou, from the Imperial Court to the counties, have been taken over by the Academy. From the Baichuan Academy, it can be seen that the students of the Academy need to be improved. There are also stubborn problems within the Academy. I think it's debatable whether all the officials in the Imperial Court will be produced by the Academy in the future. As soon as the Empress said this, all the officials were shocked. Her Majesty had long wanted to change the status quo of all the officials in Great Zhou coming from the Academy. She obviously wanted to use the Baichuan Academy's incident as a pretext to make a fuss. Immediately, a few people stood up and objected. "Your Majesty, you can't do that. The Academy was created by Emperor Wen. The 4 academies have maintained Great Zhou's stability for 100 years. Once it's changed, it will inevitably cause turmoil in the Imperial Court. Outside Great Zhou, the demon nation is watching covetously, and the ghost realm is not peaceful. The other nations seem to be obedient, but they all have their own agendas. Within Great Zhou, there is also a demon sect that often causes trouble. If the Imperial Court is in turmoil, it will inevitably give them an opportunity. If your Majesty insists on doing things your own way, you may cause Great Zhou to fall into a quagmire, and your Majesty will also become a sinner." The people who spoke were all from the Baichuan Academy, Qingyun Academy, and Myriad Scroll Academy, including Vice President Chen of the Baichuan Academy. The other 2 academies were happy to see the Baichuan Academy's reputation being damaged, but in the face of this matter, the 3 academies maintained a tacit understanding. The Empress didn't respond to the people from the Academy. Instead, she asked, "What do you think?" The Imperial Court was silent. Although there were some disadvantages to the Academy's existence, on the whole, the advantages definitely outweighed the disadvantages. Since the time of Emperor Wen, the Academy had been in existence for 100 years. It had continuously sent talents and played a very important role in maintaining the stability of Great Zhou. Her Majesty wanted to remove the Academy's privileges because she wanted to break the situation in the Imperial Court and concentrate power in her hands. This would completely overturn the situation established by Emperor Wen. No one could predict the future of Great Zhou. For most of the officials in the Imperial Court, the position of the Empress did not last long. The throne of the Great Zhou would eventually be handed over to either the Shao clan or the Zhou clan. While the Empress was on the throne, it was not suitable for bold and decisive reforms, which would be detrimental to the stability of the country. After the empress spoke, none of the officials responded, and the atmosphere in the hall gradually became awkward. This was not the first time such a thing had happened. After all, almost all the officials in the imperial court were from the academy. Even the censors did not want to change the ancestral system that had been passed down for hundreds of years. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the corner of the hall. "Your Majesty is wise." Amidst the silence, a voice suddenly rang out, causing the hearts of the officials to tremble. Who was this audacious person who dared to speak at this time? They all looked at the corner of the hall, and a figure walked out from the corner. "Li Mu? It's him. Why is he here? Wait, is he wearing the imperial censor robes? Imperial censor? His Majesty made him an imperial censor?" Li Mu met the gazes of the officials and walked out from the corner of the Golden Hall. After someone responded, the Empress asked again, "What do you think, Minister Li?" The way the Empress addressed Li Mu made all the officials in the imperial court dumbfounded. Her Majesty had always addressed the officials in the imperial court as Minister Zhang, Minister Li, and other ministers. When had she ever used Minister Li? This special form of address clearly indicated that this newly promoted imperial censor was a trusted aide of Her Majesty the Empress. Li Mu walked to the center of the hall, cleared his throat, and said, "Your Majesty is wise. I also think that the academy system established during the reign of Emperor Wen was a great policy 100 years ago. To a large extent, it changed the chaos of the great Zhou officials who were not talented and virtuous. In the past 100 years, the Great Zhou has been developing continuously. This system can no longer meet the needs of the imperial court. The atmosphere in the hall was completely different from the past. In the past, if no one responded to the decrees proposed by the Empress, it would be ignored and no officials would discuss it. As long as one official stood out and agreed with the Empress, it was necessary to discuss this topic. The situation in the imperial court was complicated, and no one could predict the future. The officials who could be in the imperial court were all experienced and cunning. No one would risk the Academy's condemnation in order to protect His Majesty and give His Majesty a way out. They had never seen such a bold person. Now they saw it. The people of the Academy naturally would not allow Li Mu to slander the Academy. Vice President Chan said, "You are just an imperial censor. How dare you speak so arrogantly? The Academy has provided so many talents to the imperial court every year. Why can't it meet the imperial court's needs? Talents?" Li Mu glanced at him and asked, "A talent like Jiang Zhe, relying on the Academy's background, raped a woman in broad daylight. Is this the talent the Academy mentioned?" This matter had become a pain for the Academy. Vice President Chun said with a gloomy face, "This kind of bastard is just a special case. He can't represent the Academy. The Academy has expelled him and will never hire him again." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Instructor Fong, as an instructor of the Academy, did not set an example and strictly restrain his students. Instead, he allowed Jiang Zhe to rape a woman and tried to deceive the imperial court afterward to cover up his crime. If the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. What kind of students can such an instructor teach? If such a student enters the imperial court and becomes an official, how many people will be bullied by him?" He said coldly, "The instructor is like this, the students are like this. His Majesty just pointed out the shortcomings of the Academy. What right do you have to scold His Majesty as a sinner?" Vice President Chun was speechless for a moment, and then immediately said, "Instructor Fong can't represent all the instructors of the Academy. You are generalizing. What about the county magistrate of Yang County?" Li Mu continued to ask. As a county magistrate, he colluded with the local tyrants and exploited the people. He created an unjust case that shook the Great Zhou. Even the heavens couldn't stand it. Which academy did he come from? The vice president of the Myriad Scroll Academy lowered his head slightly. Vice President Chan said, "You are still generalizing. There are 36 counties in the Great Zhou and hundreds of county magistrates. What can a county magistrate of Yang County prove?" Li Mu smiled at him and said, "Okay, let's not talk about the place. Let's talk about Xin Du. As far as I know, the county chief of the North County has long disliked the county magistrate of Yang County's actions. He has submitted many memorials, but the evaluation of the county magistrate of Yang County by the Ministry of Personnel every year is A+. Because of this, the county magistrate of Yang County is even more unscrupulous and can do whatever he wants. This kind of corrupt official can be A+, the highest grade. Are the officials sent by the Academy to the Ministry of Personnel all blind and deaf? The Minister of Personnel's face was livid. The faces of the officials of the Ministry of Personnel also alternated between green and white. In front of His Majesty and hundreds of officials, they could only endure being scolded in their noses. This was because what he said was the truth. The county magistrate of Yang County was the brother-in-law of the Assistant Minister of Personnel. The Assistant Minister had personally instructed, so who would dare to make things difficult for him in the evaluation? The officials were silent. Li Mu's subordinates had beaten up many officials' sons. He even forced the officials involved to change the silver law of substitution. The officials were silent. Li Mu continued, I won't say more. The officials from the academy have formed cliques in the imperial court and are hostile to each other. Can't you see that? His loud voice echoed in the Golden Palace. Even the giants standing at the front couldn't help but notice him, because he was too talkative and dared to say it. He had broken the rules that the officials had tacitly agreed to. He had exposed the things that the officials wouldn't normally talk about. He had torn down the veil of the entire imperial court. Throughout history, those who dared to break the rules like this had all died without a complete corpse. Li Mu scanned the faces of the people from the academy one by one and said, Look at what you have done. His Majesty is wise and has the world in mind, but you only think about your own interests. What right do you have? What right do you have to reprimand His Majesty? Don't you feel ashamed when you reprimand His Majesty? Chapter 246. There were more than 100 officials standing in the Golden Hall, but it became Li Mu's personal performance. Because it was too quiet, his voice kept echoing in the hall. No one could answer his question. These rules, which had been tacitly agreed upon by the officials, were laid bare in front of them. It was enough to make everyone in the imperial court blush with shame. The officials were silent, and so was the academy. Li Mu continued, talking about the demon kingdom, the ghost realm, the 4 barbarians of the devil sect. These are all excuses. Everyone here knows better than anyone else that the problem of the great Zhou dynasty is not outside, but in the imperial court, in this golden hall. Li Mu's voice echoed, each word piercing the heart. The hall was silent for a long time. Then the Empress's dignified voice came from behind the curtain. Everyone, please think about Minister Li's words carefully. You may leave the court in an hour. Behind the curtain, footsteps sounded and gradually faded away. The Empress must have left from the back of the hall. After a while, Mr. Mei walked out from the back of the hall. He gave Li Mu a look, and Li Mu followed him out from the back of the hall. Inside the main hall there was silence. The Assistant Minister of Personnel's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The officials from the 6 ministries and 9 temples who had suffered at his hands did not look too good either. The vice-deans and instructors of the major academies left without a word. The officials looked at each other. The hall was silent for a long time. Then someone sighed and said, "Where did this hothead come from?" After someone spoke, the oppressive atmosphere in the hall exploded. He really dares to speak. Ha, the 6 ministries and 9 temples, and the 4 great academies, have all been scolded by him. Even His Majesty has not scolded us like this. With this kind of person as the imperial censor, I'm afraid we won't have a good life in the future. He keeps saying that His Majesty is wise, and magnanimous. He just wants to gain favor by protecting His Majesty. Can he be any more obvious? How shameless. I used to think that Zhang Chun was already shameless enough. I didn't expect Zhang Chun to be so much worse than him. The official who spoke did not hide his disgust and annoyance towards Li Mu. But there were also some who were silent and had a thoughtful look on their faces, as if they were really thinking about what he had just said. There was something wrong with the imperial court. They usually turned a blind eye to these problems, but now that it was pointed out, they could no longer ignore it. Li Mu pointed out the problems of the academy, the 6 ministries, the collusion of the officials in the imperial court, and the decreasing psyche power of the people after Emperor Wen. You're quite shameless when you're protecting Her Majesty. Then he suddenly thought of something and looked at Li Mu in disbelief. Just as he was about to turn around, Zhang Chun suddenly looked at him with a face full of smiles and asked, "Your Majesty." "Ah no, Li Mu, to be honest, how do you think this official treats you?" Li Mu then said, "It's all right." "What do you mean by okay?" Zhang Chun looked displeased and said, "Back in Yangqiu County, I took good care of you. Now that you've come to the divine capital, you've caused so much trouble for me. Have I ever complained?" "Li Mu, you complain every time. It's not important." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "You made a big mistake and offended someone you shouldn't have offended. When have I not cleaned up your mess behind your back? Touch your conscience and tell me, have I not treated you well?" Li Mu touched his conscience and thought carefully. He said, "Sir, you've been very good to me." This was the truth. If it were another superior, Li Mu would have been pushed out to take the blame the first time he caused trouble for him. Zhang Chun finally smiled and said, "If you become rich in the future, don't forget my kindness?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Don't worry, I won't forget." Zhang Chun let out a long sigh of relief and muttered, "Whether or not this official can move to a bigger residence, whether or not I can have 8 maidservants to serve me, it all depends on you." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "What?" Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "Nothing, we'll talk about this in the future." After parting with Li Mu, Zhang Chun did not return to the yamen. Instead, he went straight home. Mrs. Zhang was trimming the flowers in the yard. When she saw him coming in, she asked in confusion, "You're not going to the yamen today?" Zhang Chun said, "The morning court was delayed for an hour today. It's almost time for lunch. I'll go back to the yamen after lunch." Mrs. Zhang put down the scissors and said, "You must be tired after standing all morning. Go back to your room and rest for a while. I'll cook." Zhang Chun rolled up his sleeves and said, "I'll help you." Mrs. Zhang shook her head and said, "You'd better rest. The kitchen is so small that it can't accommodate 2 people." Zhang Chun held her hand and said, "Madam, you've suffered. I promise that I'll give you a bigger house in the future. At least 5 rooms. The kitchen must also be big. It won't be crowded for 10 people to stand." Mrs. Zhang patted his hand and said, "Such a big house is enough to live in. Many officials in the court don't even have their own houses." Zhang Chun smiled and said, "In short, madam, just wait and see. One day, I'll let you live in a bigger house. In the future, there will be maidservants to do the cooking and cleaning. You can be served comfortably by them." "Good, good, good. I'll wait for that day." Mrs. Zhang shook her head helplessly and said, "Let's not talk about this first. What do you plan to do about Yi?" Zhang Chun asked, "What's the matter with Yi?" Mrs. Zhang said, "Yi will be 20 next year." Chapter 249. After a while, the director of the Ministry of Justice sent Li Mu off with a smile. He waved his hand and said, "Take care, Lordly." After sending off Li Mu, the director of the Ministry of Justice returned to his office. He slumped into his chair and sighed, Why is my life so hard? As an official of the Ministry of Justice, he was bullied by a constable of the divine capital. He was probably the most wronged director in the history of the Ministry of Justice. Li Mu left the Ministry of Justice and returned to the divine capital. He said to the constables who had just returned from their patrol and were sunbathing in the courtyard, "Come with me. We have work to do." Divine capital, Rosy Lane. There were more than 100 markets in the divine capital. There were business markets, entertainment markets, and residential markets. Rosy Lane was a residential area in the western part of the divine capital. Although it was not comparable to the markets where the southern courtyard and northern courtyard lived, it was still considered prosperous among the hundreds of markets in the divine capital. Most of the people who lived in Rosy Lane were wealthy. Most of the houses in the market had 2 or 3 courtyards. Li Mu came to a house. Wang Wu looked up at the 2 words Su Mansion on the plaque. Without waiting for Li Mu's order, he went up and knocked on the door. After a long time, slow footsteps came from inside. An old man with a wrinkled face opened the door and asked, "Sirs, what's the matter?" Li Mu went up and said, "We're from the divine capital. We're investigating a case and need your cooperation." The old servant opened the door and said, "Sirs, please come in. I'll get the master." Li Mu and the others walked into the courtyard, and the old man walked into a room. Soon, a middle-aged man walked out of the room with quick steps. The middle-aged man looked at them in surprise and asked, What case are you investigating?" Li Mu looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "You're shopkeeper Su, right?" The middle-aged man nodded and said, "That's me." Li Mu continued asking, 3 months ago, was shopkeeper Su's daughter violated?" When the middle-aged man heard this, his face was filled with grief and indignation. His voice was hoarse as he said, "We have already decided not to sue you. Why are you still unwilling to let us go?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Shopkeeper Su, you've misunderstood. We're really here to investigate this case. If you've really been wronged, the imperial court will give you justice." The middle-aged man's face was filled with fear. He shook his head and said, "There is no injustice. My daughter is fine. You can go." The middle-aged man clearly did not trust them. Li Mu sighed and said, "Shopkeeper Su, my name is Li Mu. I'm from the divine capital. You can trust us." The middle-aged man raised his head abruptly and asked, "Luoyang Yamen, you're Arrestor Li?" In the end, this matter will become more and more serious, and the consequences will become more and more serious. Do you think you can escape from it, Lord Yang? When the time comes, who do you think will be pushed out by the Ministry of Justice to take the blame? Who do you think will be the minister, the assistant minister, or you, official Yang? I'm giving you a chance to make up for your mistakes on account of your help. If you don't want it, I'll bring him back to the fairy's capital. Wait! Under Li Mu's persuasion, the director of the Ministry of Justice had understood and hurriedly spoke. Li Mu had completely enlightened him. Once the case became big, the Ministry of Justice would be held responsible. The position of the director of the Ministry of Justice was neither big nor small. It was just right for him to take the blame. If he did not do something to make up for it, he would most likely lose his position. He might even be imprisoned. He clasped his fists to Li Mu and said, "Sir Li, thank you for reminding me. I will remember your kindness." "You're welcome." Li Mu nodded and said, "In that case, let's start the trial as soon as possible." The director of the Ministry of Justice walked out of the office and saw Zhou Zhong coming out from the opposite side. He asked nervously, "Sir Zhou, the academy student committed a crime. Do you want to interrogate him yourself?" Zhou Zhong waved his hand and said, "Go ahead, I'll just listen." His gaze swept past Li Mu and then left calmly. There was a commotion in the front yard of the Ministry of Justice. The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue, Wei Bin's father, and Wei Peng had just arrived from the Luoyang Yamen. The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue saw the director of the Ministry of Justice and immediately said, "Sir Yang, please wait." The director of the Ministry of Justice turned and asked, "Sir Wei, why are you here?" The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue sighed and said, "Wei Bin is my nephew." The director of the Ministry of Justice was surprised. Then he shook his head and said, "If Sir Wei is here to plead for Wei Bin, then I'm sorry. This case has attracted a lot of attention. I can't be biased." The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue shook his head and said, "Of course not. Wei Bin is guilty. I just want to listen." The director of the Ministry of Justice nodded and said, "Yes, but Sir Wei's identity is special. You can only listen outside the court." The minister-counselor clasped his fists and said, "Thank you, Sir Yang." Then he said, "Can we have a few words with Wei Bin?" The director of the Ministry of Justice hesitated and said, "This?" At this moment, Zhou Zhong said from afar, "Don't take more than half an hour." The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue was grateful and said, "Thank you, Sir Zhou." The three of them walked to Wei Bin's side. He quickly recovered and said, "Since you have confessed, then according to the 36th article of the second book of the Law of Great Zhou, the punishment for raping a woman is between 3 and 10 years in prison. That woman was injured physically and mentally because of your rape. I now sentence you to 7 years in prison." "Your Excellency, please wait." Wei Peng stood outside the court and loudly said, "Although Wei Bin is guilty, he did not use violence or coercion. Moreover, he confessed his crime on his own initiative. According to the law, Your Excellency should be given a lighter sentence." The director of the Ministry of Justice frowned. "Do I need you to teach me how to judge a case? If you dare to disturb my judgment again, you will be punished for disturbing the court." At this moment, the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Zhong, calmly said, "Although Wei Bin is a criminal, he still has the right to defend himself. Wei Peng, if you have anything else to say to defend Wei Bin, come to the court and say it." The minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue looked at the Assistant Minister of Justice with a grateful expression. He pushed Wei Peng and said, "Why aren't you going up?" Wei Peng walked up to the court and raised his head. Apart from rape, Wei Bin's actions did not cause any other serious consequences. According to the law, he should be given a lighter sentence. The director of the Ministry of Justice glanced at Zhou Zhong. Seeing that he did not say anything, he felt somewhat uncertain. He then looked at Li Mu. Seeing that his expression was also calm, he finally decided to act according to the law. He did not favor Wei Bin, nor did he intentionally increase his punishment. If he acted according to the law, no one could blame him, right? The director of the Ministry of Justice cleared his throat and looked at Wei Peng. "What you say makes sense. In view of Wei Bin's voluntary confession, I will give you a lighter sentence and sentence you to 5 years in prison." Outside the court, the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Revenue and Wei Bin's father let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, Wei Peng struck while the iron was hot. "Sir, please wait. There are still some hidden facts to this case. Wei Bin has already confessed that apart from him, there were also the 100 River Academies Jiangzhe, Jiyun, Songzhou, and Yikong. According to the laws of the Great Zhou, the main culprit exposing the accomplices is a great merit and can be reduced or exempted from punishment. Although the crime of rape cannot be exempted, it can be reduced by at least 3 years. Hearing this, the director of the Ministry of Justice was stunned. This Wei Peng seemed to be very familiar with the law, but did he not know the difference between rape and rape? Rape of a woman was generally punished with 3 to 10 years in prison. Rape of a woman was extremely vile. The main culprit would be sentenced to at least the death penalty and could not be reduced. This law had been amended by Assistant Minister Zhou 5 years ago. Could it be that Wei Peng was looking at the unamended law of the Great Zhou from 5 years ago? Li Mu left his chair and walked up to the court. Under Wei Peng's somewhat frightened gaze, he patted his shoulder and said, "Listen to my advice. In the future, if there's nothing important, Don't contact your second uncle's family. You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.